When we lose our African connection, we lose our rural connection. When we disconnect ourselves from Africa, we cease to be a world people. Without the African connection, we are a disjointed people, begging for the entry into somebody else's house.
What do we want? Justice! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Justice! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Justice! When do we want it? Now! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Justice! When do we want it? Now! When do we want it? Now!
The essence of power is the ability to define someone's reality and have them live according to that definition as though it is a definition of their own choosing. What you do for yourself depends on what you think of yourself, and what you think of yourself depends on what you know of yourself, and what you know of yourself depends on what you have been told.
A very, very pleasant morning to you. Welcome, welcome, welcome once again. Welcome. You're inside of the Africa Forum. It is Running African. Thank you very much, Talia. Walk good. My name is Andrea Williams. My producer this morning is Joy Morgan, and we're going through until 10 o'clock. That's when the Big A comes in with the Sunday Sunshine. Seeking first the permission of the ancestors, secondly of the elders present in this space. Acknowledging my ancestors upon whose shoulders I stand. Acknowledging those who have paved the way so that we could follow. Those who have cleared the path. Acknowledging the builders of the Great Pyramids of Kemet. Understanding the purpose of the Mahat Karu. Very pleasant morning to you. Hotep my brothers, Hotep my sisters. Welcome. You're inside of the Africa Forum. Thank you for joining us on the 107s. 107.1 all the way to 107.9. Thank you for joining us on the internet at iriefm.net. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning to you. We know you're there. We see you, we hear you, we feel you. Good morning. Thank you. If you're on your iPhone, your BlackBerry, any of your Android app, good morning, good morning. Thank you for joining us inside of the Africa Forum. Saluting and respecting those who are joining us from the continent of Europe. Saluting and respecting those who are joining us on the continent of Africa. Good morning, welcome, thank you for joining. Saluting and respecting those who are joining us from Asia. Good morning, welcome. You're inside of a global forum. It's the Africa Forum. And as usual, to the core and to the family right here on the ground in Jamaica, good morning to you. Welcome. You're inside of the Africa Forum. A platform for Pan-African issues. It is Thursday, February. It is Sunday. It's Sunday, February. What date is it today? All right. We're totally out of it. Is it 9? I think it is enough. Just a week away from Fuisinting. Fuisinting is next Sunday, the 16th. Just a week away when all roads will be leading into Portland for the authentic African festival on the grounds here in Jamaica. The authentic African marketplace. And of course, you know, this year coming into Fuisinting is Damegwe, who is a Senegalese griot. Gonna be gracing the stage of Fuisinting this year. And then after that, we're gonna be heading to Westmoreland, Belmont in Westmoreland on the 23rd, in tribute to Peter Tosh. Persons already coming in from all over the world to be at that event. It's an event that's kicking off on Thursday. It's kicking off with a symposium at the Belmont Academy. And then on Friday, with a splash and a get-together right across the road, right up the road from the mausoleum. Saturday, we know that lots of persons who make this their annual pilgrimage to Westmoreland will be also heading in that direction for the Saturday Night Lime. Saturday in the day, it's a children and parents, well, it's Saturday and Sunday, it's an entire children thing, but there's a special event at the mausoleum on Saturday being organized by the Peter Tosh estate, and we're going to be hearing some more about that this morning from them. But Sunday, we broadcast live. We broadcast live on Sunday from the mausoleum. We broadcast live from the home of Peter Tosh, and that broadcast will run from 6 a.m. to 12 noon. Myself, Mota Baruka, and the team will be in Westmoreland for that live outside broadcast under the theme this year, Legalize It. Lots of persons talking about that. So as we continue to act within the vision of the program, reuniting the African family for development, bearing witness, demanding change, ensuring that there is an African-centered agenda for change and development. This is what we're going to be doing this morning. Well, we've got issues to talk about. We've got lots of issues that are affecting us that we need to talk about. One of the main things we'll be discussing this morning is the topic, I Am That I Am, reclaiming our African identity. What does that mean? What does that mean? Does that mean we have to Sankofa or Sankoti or Sankoe? However we're going to do that. How does our Pan-African and African identity relate to our spiritual identity? Can we talk about reclaiming an identity without talking about African power? Without talking about black power? Can we talk about an African identity without talking about African unity? As Shekanta Diop has questioned and has pointed to. Kwame Nkrumah also. African power, African unity, African identity, all wrapped up in one. Can we separate them? Is this reclamation of the African personality, the African identity, contingent upon the African power, African unity? How does the past fit in terms of staking out and seeking out an identity which is independent of the identity constructed through the Western ideology? Reclaiming our African identity. How do we reclaim our African identity? Through our names, for example. Is renaming and reclaiming ourselves part of the reclamation process? And if so, can that stand alone? So Professor Paton Duncan, an experienced teacher of mathematics and physics, he's a quantum physicist. He doesn't refer to himself as an Egyptologist, but we know that he is, so we have said that. His professional background includes educational leadership and administration, physics curriculum, development training, and implementation of integrated holistic educational strategies to establish successful educational outcomes in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. We feel that the reclamation of the African identity is directly related to community building and therefore education, and so that we have to talk about miseducation if we're going to be talking about reclaiming the African identity. How does the African identity relate to national pride? These are some of the questions we're going to be answering this morning, or trying to answer at least. So Professor Paton Duncan, Saku Sabu Ma'at Heru Amen, he has reclaimed his African name. He has been initiated in the ancient Egyptian orders. He'll tell us about that. And so has reclaimed his name. And we should call him by his name. Saku Sabu Ma'at Heru Amen. Professor Paton Duncan is who we know him as. And he's joining us this morning for a discussion in this Black History Month on the African identity and reclaiming the African identity. How do we do that? How do we go about doing that? What does it mean to be African? What does the African personality embody? Where does historical memory and genetic memory fit into the reclamation of the African identity? What about our collective consciousness? Can we reclaim our African identity individually? In this Black History Month, we have to begin to ask those questions. And why is it important to reclaim our African identity? Think about it. Who are you? What does it mean to be African? Is it a call to order? Is it a call to action? Are you being marshaled to resistance of European ideologies? And is that why we're finding it so difficult in terms of the obstacles that are put in our way through the education or miseducation process, through the church, through social institutions? What if we reclaimed our African identity? How might that impact our societies? How might that impact our communities? What if we did that? What if we stop to look at and to examine our everyday experiences in the African context? What does it mean to have African-centered ideals? Some of the questions, some of the issues we're talking about this morning. All right, also this morning, as we continue inside of Black History Month and as we count down to tribute to Peter Tosh, joining me in the studio, just returning from the continent of Africa, a 3 or 4 country tour of Africa, Dr. Jelanie Niah will be joining me later on in the program. And this morning we're going to be looking at the August 7, 2001 report, Legalize It, Ganja report we're talking about. As you know, the Peter Tosh tribute is going to be on February 23 from the Mausoleum, Belmont in in Westmoreland. Dr. Jelanie Niah is a lecturer in the Institute of Caribbean Studies at the University of the West Indies. He's going to help us to understand why Peter Tosh is relevant within the context of the Ganja Commission and the recommendations that were made. So we're going to be examining the Ganja Commission, the recommendations from the Ganja Commission of 2001. It wasn't the first Ganja Commission. We'll talk about that. And then still on Peter Tosh and the events in Belmont, we're going to be joined on the phone lines by the son of Peter Tosh, Dave Tosh, will join us on the phone line to talk about the activities and what's happening there in Westmoreland in terms of how we're gearing up for the celebration and the tribute to Peter Tosh on the 23rd. So Dave Tosh joins me live on the telephone lines this morning as we continue to count down to February 23, which will take us down or up or across to Westmoreland for the annual tribute to Peter Tosh. All right, also coming up in the program this morning, so the issue of Pinnacle remains highly relevant. Pinnacle, of course, as Dr. Clinton Hutton refers to it, the geographic faculty of Rastafari, and now in contention in terms of claims to the space that is Pinnacle, the space which grew and fostered and bred the movement that is now globally known as the Rastafari movement. So Rastafarians and Jamaicans, Pan-Africanists, Africans from across the world, not just here on the island, understand that this space is important to be preserved, to be protected as a place where this great movement started. Well, at least where this great movement was fostered. We know that it started in St. Thomas and then moved on to Kingston, but that Pinnacle was its final resting place in terms of where Leonard Howell, one of the founding fathers of the Rastafari movement, and one who can actually claim, as Professor Robert Hill's book, Dread History, Leonard P. Howell and Millenarian Visions in the Early Rastafari Religion, points to, can actually claim the founding father title of Rastafari, of the Rastafarian movement. So that we understand the significance and the importance of Pinnacle, this morning we're going to be speaking to Monty Howell, Monty Howell is a son of Leonard Howell. He joins me from the United States this morning on the telephone lines. A new development in Pinnacle also, we're hearing that, and there was a press release from the Office of the Prime Minister which suggested that, or which said that which actually said that the ministry, that the land issue has now been moved to the Ministry of Land. And the press release said that the committee, which was established to deal with the issues related to lands at Pinnacle in St. Catherine, has been directed to refer the matter to the Ministry of Land. The directive has come from Prime Minister Portia Simpson Miller. According to the press release, chair of the three-person committee appointed by the Prime Minister met with Land Minister Robert Pickersgill on Thursday to provide documents and information related to the issue. The release from the Office of the Prime Minister says discussions will continue on the determination of other lots to be similarly declared and protected. It also went on to say that Pinnacle is located, which is located in the St. Jago Hills development. Most of the lots now are owned by private individuals. And the committee includes Professor Rupert Lewis, as you know, Judith Wedderburn, among others, chaired by Burchell Whiteman. That's the latest development. What does that mean? We're going to be joining members of Parliament there in Spanish Town, Warmington, the other day, talking about if you do not vote, you're not entitled to state benefits. So there is a lot to clean up before, in Black History Month, Mr. Ruel Reid, you stand up and tell us how to perform genocide on the black race. We see it happening on the continent of Africa. Israel is now giving compulsory Depo-Provera, birth control to Ethiopian women because they can't have or afford for too many black babies to be born on the land. Neither can you, it seems. So your idea of dealing with the problems which face us is not to come up with proper solution, but one of the biggest acts that you have embarked on since being named a senator is to stand up in Black History Month to tell us how to perform genocide on the African mother and on the African father. You should take a look in the mirror, Mr. Ruel Reid, at yourself. And you should probably have a talk across the way with Mr. Dayton Campbell. Ask him, as Member of Parliament from Bamboo, how his mother, who was a domestic helper, managed to raise him and his two sisters and put them through universities while his father was in and out of prison and is still in prison to this day. And how come he has managed to be a medical doctor with a father in prison and a mother who is a domestic helper, a young man who I think is in his 20s. Ask him how come he has managed to be a medical doctor, how come he has managed to be a member of Parliament. Ask him how come he has managed now to be studying law even as we speak. The solution is not to abort babies before they are born. The solution is not to further perform genocide on the African race. The solution is not to kill our children before they are born. The solution is to fix the problems that are leading to the issues we are now facing with our children. The solution is to ensure that the courts work, that the legal system works, that the police force is not so corrupt. so that when acts of child molestation and rape are committed against our children, that they are caught and they face the full force of the law. The solution is to fix that. The solution is also to ensure that people who want to work, and most of our mothers do, can find work. The solution is to have a talk with the leader of the opposition and the Prime Minister about the value of the up and down traveling that we see happening, and how that is reflected and how that is impacting on the mother, how that is impacting on the family, how that is impacting on the father. The solution is to look again at the IMF and to figure out how it is that we are selling out our people, have sold them and will continue to sell them out. Blame the victim and punish the victim. So what? You're gonna criminalize pregnancy now? How are you going to do that, Mr. Royal Reid? You're gonna criminalize pregnancy in Black History Month? Because I bet you anything, you're not gonna see this among the out of many one people. You're gonna see it among the one people, the black women, especially in Jamaica, because we do have a problem there. Is this the best you can do? Is this the best you can do? And yet you're a principal. Is this the best you can do in Black History Month? We must condemn that with everything we have. Burn that and mash down that lie. In Black History Month, how dare you? How dare you talk about criminalizing pregnancy and committing genocide on the black race in any other month, but worst of all in Black History Month. Shame on you. So anyway, as I said before, we've got a lot to talk about this morning, and I'm going to take a quick break, come back, and then we're going to be speaking with Valerie Dixon. So quick break, we'll be right back.
Speak truth to the people. To identify the enemy is to free the mind. Free the mind of the people. Speak to the mind of the people. Speak truth.
All right, as we go to the phone lines, my sister, Valerie Dixon, how are you?
I am very well, thank you, this morning, Andrea, and how are you?
I am doing very well. Have you had your run, your walk, your jog?
Well, I've had my brain jog since morning. But I heard you, I listened to you,
yes.
And I said, you are all fired up, and you're fired up in the right direction. Andrea, let's cut to the chase.
Mm-hmm.
We are in a serious dilemma.
Yes.
And the sad part about it is the blueprint or the black print has been given to us by our dear messenger, Marcus Messiah Garvey. But the establishment just refuses to let us have the teachings of this great man.
Well, you're doing the right work in terms of ensuring that we're not waiting on them to give it to us. You're accessing it and making it available to the immediate community and many others around you. And I think that if more of us do this, because the thing about it is that if we wait on them, it will never happen. We have to force them to make this happen. And I think if more of us do this, and that is why when we're even talking about the African identity later on, and I was asking, what does this mean? Is part of the reclaiming the African identity also part of understanding the need to resist the Eurocentric education or miseducation and reclaiming our own, which, as you pointed out, the black print for black power, coming from Mwalimu Marcus Messiah Garvey.
That's right. But one of our biggest stumbling blocks, the stumbling block to my mind for the black race, is the media.
Mm-hmm.
The media in all its form.
The media also represents a society.
Precisely.
It's representative.
It represents the establishment.
Yes.
And that was why Marcus Garvey had to be destroyed, because he upset the establishment in trying to bring this message to black people.
And I think, Valerie, that there is that, and we talked last week in the bottom line, I talked about the need for radical media and rebellious communication that is not tied to commercialism. And I think when you talk about the media, these are issues that we have to look at in terms of how the media is funded, who own what, and what their agendas are, and they will always be what they are. So that those of us who see the need for radical media, for rebellious communication, for reclaiming our African identity and understanding ourselves, even within the context of Millennium, Marcus Messiah Garvey, that we are going to have to be our own media, set up our own communication. Right now, the digital technology is what it is, so that so much is happening there that a lot more can be done than what used to be done even in the days when Millennium walked this earth. So that we make use of that media in the meantime, as well as using whatever radical spaces we can find.
I think what you're really talking about, Andrea, is that we as a people have not been able to innovate, and we have not been able to adapt to our circumstance.
Yes.
We are stuck in a mode that is no longer working for us. And we don't seem to have the leaders around us who are able to break out of this mold and get us to the place where we can find our balance. We have a pebble in our shoe, and it keeps coming up to the surface and irritating us time after time, generation after generation. But we just refuse because it is, let me put it this way, we have been so socialized in our thinking that we are afraid. We have anger, we have fear, we know we are rejected, there's envy, jealousy, guilt, frustration, or you name it, we could go on. And all because we refuse to listen to what the pebble in our shoe is telling us. That it is time for change we head.
And you are doing that now in Resource Manchester. This is the ninth staging of the Marcus
Garvey
Fair.
Fair.
All right. So tell us now. So, and this year a big event, because here we have a group of Tainos returning to Jamaica. Talk to us about that, Valerie.
Oh yes, this has always been a dream of mine when I heard that this community of resource, situated in what is called the Canna Valley, or at the edge of it, has 18 known Taino sites and many others undiscovered just yet.
Yes.
And yet we have never shown the respect that we ought to show to these first Jamaicans who have disappeared from our side. They're in our blood because we have assimilated them through intermarriage down the generations. But we have never yet really put value to the contributions that they made to Jamaica and where we are today.
Well, I couldn't stand you and let you say that, because we just did that.
I know.
Because we have been actively doing that, and many others have done. I know what you're saying, but I think I really do have to put
speaking
the
about
caveat
in this particular community.
In that community, all right, yes.
This community fails to understand what they have. They are so busy tearing each other up that if you're not careful, outside influences will come in and destroy everything right before their very eyes and leave them with a dead goose.
So that in trying to address that, you have invited Cacique Roberto
Barrero.
All right. So tell me how many are coming and who are they?
So far, we have confirmed 5 who are coming. We wanted 8, but so far we have gotten 5. And if that is so, we will be thankful.
Yeah, that's a big team anyway.
Yes, that would be. And our space in resource, to be honest with you, is somewhat limited.
Yes.
So with the amount of persons who would like to come to this fair, to hear from Cacique Barrero, I am a little constrained in the amount of people that we can have this year. But the fair has 3 parts to it.
Yes.
There's the educational section that is housed in the Liberty Hall, if I can get in, but that's another issue. Then there is the performance.
That's Liberty Hall in Kingston or Liberty Hall?
No. There is the first
Liberty Hall there. Yes. Okay.
But unfortunately, again, I want to talk about this thing called a dog in the manger. Have you ever heard that term?
Dog in the manger? Yes.
Dog in the manger.
Yes.
Cows in foreign lands where there's snow, they have to be kept inside during the winter. So in the season before winter, the farmers dry the grass and call it hay. Mm-hmm. And they put the grass inside the barn to feed the cows during the winter. And they build a box to put the hay in so the cows can come to the box. And that box is called a manger. During Christmas time, you hear a lot about Jesus being born in the manger. Now, the stray dogs, or the dogs that have no warmth, take shelter in the barn, and they jump into the box. Now remember, dogs don't eat hay, but they jump into the box and won't allow the cows to come and feed in the manger because it's warm for them, they are secure there, and they would rather stay in the manger and stop the cows from eating, so the cows are starving while they're kept warm. Mm-hmm. And you almost have to pay them to get them out of the manger. Mm-hmm. So this is a situation, it's that kind of attitude I am faced with. Mm-hmm. And again, we have to realize that to keep the memory of Marcus Garvey alive, you have got to keep calling his name. Mm-hmm. Many of our heroes don't get the recognition that they deserve in Jamaica because they are soon forgotten. If Pinnacle didn't happen, nobody would remember Leonard Howell.
I cannot let you, once again, I cannot let you say that. In 2007, we spent 2 or 3 months. We went in search of Leonard Howell. We have been talking about Leonard Howell ever since. No, Val, we can't make you say those things.
No.
Val, you are not to say those things
hold on to your brush, Andrew.
No, and it's no brush.
Last night, I was speaking with some people who are in my age group, and I said to them, so what do you think of what is happening in Pinnacle? And the response was, Pinnacle?
Of
what
course.
Is that?
Yes, but we must not, but we cannot negate, no, Valerie, no, hang on there. Because, you see, we cannot negate the work that so many others are doing. You see, that's the point that we have to make. You know, we have to highlight and big up and bring to the fore, in other words, foreground that which is happening so that can translate into and motivate others. But if we continue to say nobody is and nobody is when so many people are, then in essence, we're like a dog chasing its tail.
I take your point. But my point is that for too many Jamaicans, we do not valorize our heroes and our heroines. When they are dead and gone, we still don't give them the respect that they are due.
And that is well understood.
They become almost like footnotes in our history.
And that is well understood.
That is not right.
I agree with you. And in the interest of time, because we're out of time actually, but I just wanted to talk a little bit more about the event itself, what is going to happen there in terms of what I know the Cacique Barrera will be giving the keynote speech. And then what else will be happening on the day, on the 23rd?
On the 23rd, we're going to be looking seriously to showcase the work of our national hero, Marcus Garvey, for all to come and see. Yes. There will be many exhibits in the hall. We have exhibits from RADA, JAS, Manchester High School will be there, the Jamaica Heritage Trust, and lots of other important agencies and authorities that are helping with national development that we need to know more about. Then there is the next part of it, the community, an exceptionally good day, above normal profits. Okay. So it's in those 3 areas that we hope to educate, entertain, and to also bring about a good day for the patrons and a good day for the vendors as well.
All right. And how can people get to Resource?
Resource, just find NCU if you're coming. And it's 45 minutes from the stoplight at NCU, heading south. And when you get to Cross Keys, you head east. And the signs will be there showing you that it's the second turn on the right hand from Cross Keys to get into Resource.
Is there an entrance fee?
No, it is absolutely free. And this is why many people probably think that I make so much money from this fair, but that is not true.
No,
it is free. You know how it is, Andrea. We do these things because we almost feel as if it's our life's calling. Because it's our pebble in our shoe. We just can't get it out until we do something.
Doing your purpose.
So,
doing your purpose. All right, thank you very much, my sister. So it's the 23rd of February.
23rd, Sunday the 23rd. And regardless of what is happening, I'm inviting all who can come to Resource to really big up Marcus Garvey, big up the first Jamaicans, and learn. Educate yourselves. Learn. And entertainment will be there. And just patronize all the stallholders and all the food vendors and our farmers and everybody who really has a hand in helping to keep the memory of our national hero, Marcus Garvey, alive. And as the new lady president, I would also like to say that that is one of my purposes right now, to keep the name of Marcus Garvey alive and to uplift and improve those who want to be improved and uplifted.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're very, very welcome.
Able to get Monty Howell on the phone lines, but we do have our brother Miguel Lone, attorney at law, who we have heard that he has withdrawn from the case, and we have questioned that, but we're going to find out why, and hopefully Miguel can shed some light on what's happening here. Hey, Miguel, good morning.
Greetings and blessings.
Greetings, my brother. Miguel, as the issues regarding Pinnacle unfold and so much is emerging, we hear in the middle, and so much is distracting. We hear in the middle of all of that, and we know that you gave the Leonard Howell lecture, didn't you? During the In Search of Series, wasn't it you who gave the Leonard Howell lecture?
Oh yes.
Right.
I had the honor of doing that.
Right, and so that, and long before that, you have been one of those who have been seriously looking at issues regarding Pinnacle and Leonard Howell. First thing, Miguel, why did you withdraw from the case?
We reached a point where there were some people there who I would have great difficulty working with. I really couldn't work with them anymore. Odesh was one. We just could not work with her anymore.
And but we have been told, and we had expected Monty Howell to say this morning, that it was and we have heard elsewhere that it was a conflict of interest because you are a member of the board of a Leonard Howell committee, and so as a director of the board, and as such, that presented a conflict of interest.
That is foolishness, Sister Andrew. That has no bearing at all. In fact, being a member of the board is the very reasons why you should represent the board.
That's what I thought.
Yes, that's sheer common sense.
Yes.
That is things that people have concocted. It has no bearing at all in the matter. Persons have their own agenda, and promises and commitments that were made were not being kept. On what
side? Where were promises and commitments not being kept?
My side was kept. Mm-hmm. I made a commitment that I would file the papers to try and save the case. And I kept my side of the bargain. The other sides were not kept at all. And then there were other persons who came into the picture who had other agendas, numerous other agendas, and, just muddled the water with things that persons do not know any law, know anything about, and that type of thing. Mm-hmm. But I tried very hard because the objective is Pinnacle. The main thing is Pinnacle. And we really don't, like I said on other media houses, when you're up a formidable enemy the way we are in this matter, and you have persons who do not understand issues and make the thing become distracting, it makes the enemy laugh at us. Mm-hmm. Just imagine you go to court and you have 2 applications now for the very same thing. When persons beg me to file papers to save the case, and then you have 2 applications for the same. We look stupid. And one of the opponents is saying, look, you're late, which we admit. But at least when I filed it, when they came to me, it was 2 weeks late.
Yes.
Now, if you have something filed 3 months late, that's even worse. And to just let our listeners even understand the ramifications of what's happening here. You don't have to be lawyers or anything to understand this. When the matter was being argued at Spanish Town, one of the thrusts that Brother Barry Frankson was pushing was adverse possession, meaning that the Howell family and Rastafarians and the Howellites were in possession of the land. Now, the three members of the Howell family who gave evidence at the court in Spanish Town, the opponent just had to ask a few questions, one of which was, where do you live now? And all three live in the United States. You can't be claiming possession of land when you live in the United States. That's not realistic. So that weakens the lawyer's hand. It's not an easy case to win. Mm-hmm. Because it's not like you even live in Jamaica where you could say every weekend you went up there. No.
So what about the Rastafarians? Did any Rastafari give evidence in court? Anybody who was living?
If I recall, Brother Owe, right, gave evidence. Mm-hmm. And tried to save the day, and that was good evidence, very good evidence that he gave, and so on. But
so Miguel, before you go on, Miguel, I want you to come back to the broader picture. Is that you said just a few questions had to be asked, and you said one was, where do you live? Can you tell us what were some of the other questions that are pertinent for us to know?
Well, other issues that were pertinent, for example, a letter was put in evidence which showed that Sister Catherine Howell wrote to the same developers some years ago, I think it's about 2006 or so, asking for permission to keep an Ayabingi up there. Oh. Now, if you own the property, you don't ask other person's permission. Mm-hmm. So things like those make the things hard.
Yes.
Now, however...
But they're not insurmountable.
No, you're right, it's not insurmountable now, because... And this would be my thrust, and this is a thrust that I think will help us. The reality is the Howellites and the Rastafarians were chased from the land by the police, acting on behalf of whoever. So up until the 1980s, there were settlements there. There were brothers and sisters in the name of Leonard Howell living there. And we are saying that the state now colluded with the developers to chase us off the land, and that was why the settlements moved down to Tredegar Park.
Yes.
That is a strong argument in my view. So if we never had full possession, it was because of the collusion of the state.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So that, Miguel, and I find it very interesting, even as we hear now, and we're going to be speaking with the new lawyer immediately after you, that the Prime Minister has now said that has now sent the issue to the Ministry of Land and the Environment. What do you think about this? I mean, you've been on this case for a very, very long time. What does this mean in your own thinking?
This would mean now that the different committees, the different Rastafarian groups should get together now and have discussions with the Minister of Lands to see how best and the amount of land which can be secured in the circumstances for a Pinnacle settlement. Not just a Pinnacle site or a Pinnacle lot, but a settlement. So meaningful discussions now should go forward, in my view, and to see how. Realistically, because you can't claim all the land. This is something we have to get out of some people's minds. Mm-hmm. Whether it's 400 or 500 acres, because there are persons who have bought land, built their homes, and these persons in law are what you call innocent purchasers without notice.
Yes.
You can't throw them off land and so on. But it would be wise to look at some of the land which are not yet developed and see if we can claim those lands. Now, in all fairness to Bruce Golding and the JLP government, we were well advanced at that stage when Bruce Golding was in power. when we were discussing business with Babsy Grange and so on, we were talking 50 acres.
Yes.
That is at that time, my mind was working on 100 acres.
Yes.
But if you're negotiating and claiming, and you're claiming 100, and you're going to get 50, grab the 50 and continue the struggle for the other 50. That is what we were talking when we were dealing with the booze.
But Miguel, the thing about that is that was well on the way until the Millennium Council, according to Babsy Grange and so many others, until the Millennium Council made an objection for whatever, I think on intellectual property rights or something to that effect, and stalled the process. I mean, that must be said, you know.
That was misguided. That was very much misguided when they did that. But the reality of it is that they have realized that, and they have come back together now to say, let's work together.
But I don't know about that, Miguel. What do you mean they have come back together? Because my impression of all of this, and I was talking to Maxine Stowe last week, is that, and I asked her the question, how representative is this group, the Millennium Council? Who do they represent? What organizations, what houses, what mansions? And I know that there is something on paper, and that people say things on paper. And I don't speak for anybody. I stand in this space, and I've been standing there for a very long time. And it seems to me as if they represent their own personal interests.
Well, when I say they, because yes, they have problems too. But what I mean is, for example, Brother Marcus Goff, I think he had penned that letter on behalf of the Millennium Council at the time to object and lodge certain objection which stalled and stopped the process. However, Brother Marcus was helping me tremendously in preparing the appeal. And that is why I say that sometimes in hindsight, sometimes as you go along, you learn, we develop. And I would say, therefore, that Brother Marcus, along with the Rastafari International Legal Council, along with Sister Mitzi and others, were working with us to get the process forward. As far as I know, Sister Mitzi is the chairperson of the
on paper, and it seems to me as if Sister Mitzi is up from a fight from some. We must just talk what is happening, you know. I don't know who we're covering for or who we're hiding what, but I think that Sister Mitzi herself needs to come out and to say exactly what is happening in the Millennium Council, or probably to step away from it if she needs to step away from it. Because we know, we're not fool. It's just that enough things we don't want to talk on the air. And not a lot of people are talking this on the air. But I know that it seems that to me as if she's under some challenge from others who are not even members of the Millennium Council, members of the Millennium Council, for the position there. I think that part of our problem is, as you said in that newspaper article last week, is a fragmentation with this unity and the 50, 100 and million agendas that people have and the personal agendas that people have. That is causing the problems that we now face. Miguel, just to move on though, and I think that the Millennium Council, or the people who refer to themselves as the Millennium Council, I think that this is, right now at this time, they have to stop. They have to stop and to seek consensus. My brother, they have to stop and to seek consensus. And if Sister Mitzi is a chair of a Millennium Council, then she's a chair of a Millennium Council.
Well, that's why I said that I know Sister Mitzi and I know Brother Marcus and a couple others have been working with us to get the thing moved forward and to look at the brighter picture and to get to the goal, which is to secure Pinnacle as a Rastafarian site where we have our library, our museum, our amphitheater, and things of that nature. So talking with the Minister of Land and so on is good, very good.
And do you see in your own mind that there is a cohesive group, because you are withdrawn for this very reason, that there is a cohesive group going ahead in these discussions?
No, I'm withdrawn from the case, you know.
Mm-hmm. Right. But do you see in your own mind? Yes, because you said there are certain, certain issues and distractions and so on. So do you see
that cast? But there are numerous areas now that we have to work.
Do you see a cohesive group going ahead, Miguel, to deal with the issue with the Ministry of Lands? Do you see cohesiveness?
You see, sometimes when you set out the objective, and in moving towards the objective, You might like blue shoes, I might like brown shoes, another one might like white shoes. But in working towards that goal, if the goal is to leave Kingston to reach Montego Bay, then all the vehicles are going to move ahead. And there might be some vehicles that break down that you take the occupants of those vehicles, put into the other vehicle and we'll pack up and we reach Montego Bay.
But you cannot assume that all the vehicles that turn towards Mobay are going to Mobay because some might be going to Ochi.
I have to assume that for peace and
well, this is why but this is why I talk about consultation. It is merely going to bus driver number one and say, you going Mobay, sir, you going Mobay, sir, you going Mobay, sir. And if everybody are going Mobay, then that's fine. But if one is going to Ochi and one going to Zion Hill in St. Mary and one going to Moko in Clarendon, exactly. So this is why consultation is important.
I don't think we are that disparate in all of this. I think despite some of the antics, genuinely, by far, 98% of Howielites, Rastafarians, Pan-Africanists would like to see Pinnacle stand up as a pinnacle, both in name and in nature. So, I think generally we all want to see Pinnacle. It's just that there might be different routines, there might be different things and so on. But as time goes on, I'm confident that our goal, in pursuit of our goal, we will achieve a lot.
All right, Brother Miguel, we're willing to assist in any way that we can. As usual, I've always been that way. And just watching this and being a part of this, because we can't just stand back and demand change. We have to be an active part of a change. We have to be agents of change. So the armchair radical thing not going to work right now. We have to be integrally involved. Lots happening with Pinnacle. Lots of things are happening in terms of even the Occupy Pinnacle situation. There are many, many ways, I'm sure, to get involved. We would like to know what those ways are for those persons who are planning some of these. And then we can, and wherever we are, let us do what we can. Call if you have to call the talk shows. Write if you have to write the newspapers. And I see a lot of people doing that. I saw Perry Hensel's wife, for example, writing to the newspapers.
A letter to the Gleaner,
exactly,
yes.
and I think
that was a very good letter.
I thought so too. So thank you, Miguel. I appreciate that. Unless there's anything you think we should know that we have not asked?
No, and the whole aspect of it is good. It is sensitizing our Jamaican people. Many places people are talking about it and so on. So that aspect, and the mere fact that we have now brought the government to the table is good.
Right.
And the judges themselves have the three judges that the matter came before have expressed concern. Mm-hmm. This is why we didn't really want this type of confusion which has come about. They have said things to show concern for Rastafarians. Mm-hmm. Other judges that have contacted me have also expressed concern. So what you all are doing, that is the good thing that has been coming out in terms of Jamaican people honestly feeling that Pinnacle should think. So, the opposition has also contacted me, and they too are very much concerned. And I have asked them to issue statements, not just with Pinnacle, because Marcus, the birthplace of Marcus Garvey is also in the mix.
Of course, yes.
Nothing has been done since Bruce Golding came out of office.
Right. So and we know ground was broken and all of that to deal with that issue. That has stalled since then. But the Minister of Culture is fascinated with Jamaican culture. And I think if we have a Minister of Culture who's just fascinated by the culture, then we have the wrong Minister of Culture. Thank you very much, Miguel.
Blessings and honor.
All right. And listen, the Mahat Keru is what our purpose is. We must not be afraid to speak truth to power. And if we have a minister who's been asked, how long have you always been interested in culture? And the answer is yes, I've always been fascinated by the Jamaican culture. No, that answer itself tells you that we have the wrong person in that spot. We have nothing against the minister, but she'd probably do much better at the Ministry of Tourism. And that is not to say we have anything against her. We'd be quite happy to work with her at the Ministry of Tourism, but I think she needs to be removed from culture and youth and placed either tourism or foreign affairs. We can't be afraid anymore.
When we lose our African connection, we lose our rural connection. When we disconnect ourselves from Africa, we cease to be a world people. Without the African connection, we are a disjointed people, begging for the entry into somebody else's house. Free the mind of the people. Speak to the mind of the people. Speak truth.
We're back with you inside of the African Forum, the Africa Forum Running African, and Amikal Cabal talked about the speaking truth to the people, about being disjointed from our Africanness, and we're going to be talking about identity later on in the program. But at some point in our lives, whether through rebellious communication or radical media or radical actions, we're going to have to stand up. Because if we don't, we are defeated. And that's deliberate dead air. Because we have to think about it. At some point in our lives, we're going to have to stand up to so-called authority. We're going to have to stand up to parliamentarians. We're going to have to stand up to prime ministers and presidents, because freedom and liberty and justice and equity, those are the goals, you know. And oppression by its very character breeds rebellion. We're going to have to stand up. At some point, we're going to have to experience and feel righteous indignation. We're going to have to get mad about this. Mad about the way in which we are treated as if we're less than. Mad about our exclusion. Mad about the apparent don't care of our Prime Minister. The Ministry of Culture is not functioning as a Ministry of Culture. Culture is very important. Culture and identity, we do not separate them. And so that there must be, even within the thinking of the Prime Minister, and you're doing a disservice to the Minister of Culture, because there's so much more that she could do for Jamaica. We think that she can. We think that there's so much she can offer, so much more, but you have placed her in a place where even to the most untrained eye, she's not qualified or suitable to be in. It is simple. And we must be able to say that without being afraid. That's why people have cabinet shuffles. Nothing wrong with cabinet shuffle, you know. Shuffle it. Shuffle the cabinet. And find somebody who understands that why we talk about out of many one is one African. And the many are African. Simple. Minority rule? Is that where we are? All right, we're going back to the phone lines. Bobber Greg from the Millennium Council. Prophet Greg is calling in, and we're happy to welcome him to this space. Prophet Greg, thanks very much for calling in.
Yes,
all right.
Yes. I'd like to say greetings to everyone in the name of His Imperial Majesty Emperor Jah Rastafarian.
Yes, and the main reason why you called in is why?
Yes, right now, Sister Andrea, I want the public to know that there are a lot of issues happening. A lot of talk is being said. Yeah. The Rastafarian Millennium Council name has been ringing out there, yet not giving the interview an opportunity to express fully what is on the table. Mm-hmm. Because the whole objection and the whole representation of the community going forward now began with Lion and Ras Howell Wright, who opposition proposal Rastafari Economic Village project, right, that included 50 acres to be established a heritage center up at Pinnacle, and even recognizing all the commune spaces, Scotts Pass, Pit 4, 12 Tribe Ground, every commune space to be also recognized within that heritage setting, but beginning at Pinnacle at for obvious reason, under the intellectual property rights of Rastafari community. You were just speaking of rights of culture and rights of identity. That is intellectual property rights, where culture is defined through the community who created it, right? So going forward, we submitted a 50-acre document named a Rastafari Economic Village Project. Going forward, we'll put that to government.
All right,
so, let me talk, please. All right.
You can't do that.
You want to talk, but
no. I need clarification on something that you said.
Okay.
You know that since you come on, I have not said anything. All I've said to you is good morning.
No.
And you have been talking. No, Prophet Greg, it don't work like that. It don't work like that.
What you want to know? Don't you want to know why
I didn't ask your question. You called.
No, but you were mentioning it on here why we object and everything.
Prophet Greg, and I need clarification on a point you made. You said that that the two persons made an objection in court. And
they were representing in court. Representing, not objecting.
That's why I'm asking for clarification. What do you mean?
If you're in court on an issue, if we were taken to court by the developer.
And by the way, sorry, let us be respectful of each other and respectful of the space, all right? Because I'm not going to take no abuse verbally from no man. Go ahead.
No, we're not.
You go right. I'm telling you that.
I am saying to you that the issue needs clarification, and that is what I'm here to clarify. What was going on in court? The reason why, as a matter of fact, the objective of the 50 acres were on the table. What was being negotiated even before it reached the court.
Yes.
Lion and Oedem was reasoning for a 67 lots. This is what before any form of arbitration, anything. Yes. That was a discussion that going on between the developers, etc. Right? It reached into the position of a court case now when the developers are in, because all this negotiation ended up and the whole lights got dragged into the whole situation, right? Because of obviously for the Pinnacle defense and their family, etc.
So did the Millennium Council object, as Babs Grange said, and as so many others have said in this space? Did the Millennium Council make an objection?
We objected because when it was being negotiated, even before it reached to the point, we objected when they tried to acquire only 3 lots. That is 3/4 acre.
You mean 5 lots?
3. No, listen.
Yes.
3 lots. This is not being said nowhere in the media. No time at all.
But the only person, because remember, I interviewed Lisa Grant and I interviewed Lalita Davis Mattis, and they all said it was 5 lots. Hang on there. What year was it? What year was the objection made?
The first objection, I believe it was in 2010, 9-10. As a matter of fact, there was a Rastafari, there was a trumpet rally called when it was at Mona Road. Jack Bunny Whalers called a trumpet rally, and at that trumpet rally, I think even Miguel Lan was at that trumpet rally. We read a 7-page statement on the reason.
So at that time in 2010, who was the Minister of Culture?
I think Babsy Grange was at the time. It was in her administration when it was started, right? And going forward, because it was the Prime Minister Bruce Golding who had made the commitment to for the acquisition of 3 lots. Not 5, not even 6. As a matter of fact, it's not even 5 lots, it is 6 lots. So even the Lisa Grant, when she speaks of 5 lots, it is not 5. It
was 5. It was always 5 plus 1. But we can get caught up on numbers. Let me just ask you this.
Yes.
Explain to our listeners and to myself, who is the Millennium Council?
The Rastafari Millennium Council, Andrea, I know you want this, but we've been through this over and over.
No, I'm not. I've never asked you that question.
It is an umbrella organization representing the major mansions, excluding the Congress, which is the Ethiopia Africa Black International Congress. Let me get that straight. Coming together, speaking in one voice, representing the issues of Rastafari is concerned, beginning with the rights of repatriation, beginning the rights of intellectual property rights where our culture is concerned, as major principles going on defending the cultural rights of the people.
What's the makeup of the Millennium Council? In other words, who has what position in the Millennium Council?
Who has what position?
Yeah, who's a chairperson, who's a secretary?
The current chairperson is Sister Mitzi Williams. I am the general secretary. Rasgat is treasurer. Irie Lyons is the international ambassador. The PR is Ras Kremlin. There are several other international consultants. Sister Maxine Stowe is also a director. And the present, we have even Marcus Goff and Barry Frankton even assisting us.
What is Bunny Wheeler's position? What is Bunny Wheeler's position?
The current position with Bunny Wheeler is at now, he's being recognized as an honorable chair. And you can have
what does that do with Sister Mitzi?
The honorary chair?
Yeah, she's a chair. You said she's a chairperson.
The honorary chair has nothing to do with the executive chair.
No, that's
I'm saying, listen,
yes.
You asked a question.
Yes, no, but you're not answering. You're saying the honorary chair. I'm asking, what does that do with Sister Mitzi?
The honorary chair has nothing to do with executive position and duty. There's a difference between an honorary chair. You can have several honorary chairs. As a matter of fact, Rasta Silva, who was the RCO chair, was made an honorary chair before he passed on.
I've had many discussions with Rasta Silva. I know him very well. That's another conversation for another time. So let me ask you this. So there's an executive chair who's Sister Mitzi. And Bunny Wheeler is now being made. At the moment he's not, but he's now being made an honorary chair. Whose decision is it?
Because of the role of Jabi.
What is that role?
The role? Mm-hmm. Well, when the council was formed in 2007, Ras Bunny Wheeler has always been assisting us, even with the Ras. Apparently, I think you're supposed to know about the trumpet rallies that were called the Millennium trumpet rallies. We had one recently at Trenchtown. That was the 5th one, right? So he had always assisted the council within objection. He represented. He was assisting us even in the first negotiation where we had the University Congress, the University Conference in 2010. He was always there trying to assist the council in supporting Rastafari issues.
Right.
As an ancient and as a pioneer in the business of Rastafari, or LR ancient, as you would say. So we give thanks for that support and the accreditation that he has gotten. Even recently at this university anchoring had honored him as one of the honorees.
Okay, so
he's recently made a cultural ambassador by CARICOM, recognizing that through music for the issues of reparation. So these are what is being bestowed on Ras Bunny Wheeler.
And that's why he's now being made an honorary chair. But and I'm not questioning that. I'm questioning what does that mean for Sister Mitzi? Is this in a way a move to unseat Sister Mitzi as a chairperson? And I'm not speaking on her behalf. I haven't spoken to her in years. I'm just asking these questions. Yes.
You're asking unseat. Listen me carefully. There are 2 chairs positions supposed to be operated in the council.
Yeah.
An alpha chair and an omega chair, which is really interpreted as a male and female. There is presently only the alpha chair, the omega chair, the female chair. So we are not putting or recognizing Bunny Wheeler as any alpha chair. It's an honorary chair, different from the alpha chair. So no one is up.
No, I was talking about Bunny Wheeler and I was talking about unseating Sister Mitzi.
Sister Mitzi. Yes. What is required according to the bylaws of the council is the position of alpha chair, in which Ras Howie Wright and Sister Mitzi were seated up as both alpha and omega.
Okay, whose decision is it a unanimous decision within the Millennium Council to name an honorary chair?
It is a unanimous decision?
Yeah, to name an honorary chair within the council.
It's a decision that has been taken in recognition of the works of Ras Bunny Wheeler.
No, I'm not asking why. No, Prophet Greg, I wasn't asking you why the decision was taken, because we have answered that. I'm asking you if it was a unanimous decision among the members of the Millennium Council
well, I just said, it is a process that is ongoing. So an unanimous decision to make is what is being said out there. So it's only fair to say that if Ras Bunny Wheeler is being recognized internationally and nationally then we have an obligation as a council to bestow an honor on it. If the university is doing it, why not the council?
So who are we? When you say, because when you say we have an obligation to do that, does that we mean that it's a unanimous decision?
What? It has to be a unanimous.
No. I'm asking if it is. I'm asking if it is a unanimous decision because you have announced it.
I'm saying we hope so. We hope so.
So it's not a. It's not a unanimous decision.
No, but the decision has not been made within the council.
No, but you just announced it. You just announced it.
In the sense of what is already out there, Sister Andrea.
So it is your.
Let me repeat it again.
So it's your decision. Don't bother with the prevarication. So it's your decision. So it's your decision.
No, it's not my decision. It is what is bounced around within the executive.
Who does, including Sister Bitsy?
And I thought, including Mitzi. Well, you will have to ask Sister Mitzi if she.
No, but I don't even have. I don't. No, I can't. Just listen. Sister Mitzi is a chair of the Millennium Council. So why can't you tell me if the chair has taken a decision?
No, but
why can't you answer that? Oh, you mean you don't know?
I cannot tell you her decision that she's has taken with it.
No, but
I don't know her position.
Prophet Greg, listen, do not deny me for simplicity. You understand me? Let me ask you another question. Who does the Millennium?
I thought we were supposed to be talking about Pinnacle here, not the council.
No. You called about the Millennium Council. You did not call about Pinnacle.
I called about the Pinnacle issue to clarify what was being said on the radio. And you're switching to the council representation.
But you called as a member of the Millennium Council.
On the issue of Pinnacle.
Exactly. That's why I'm asked. So before you can talk on the issue of Pinnacle representing the Millennium, let me finish. To representing the Millennium Council, then we have our listeners. If you notice that when we have a guest coming on, I always give their bios. Our listeners have to be confident in their mind that you are representing not just the Millennium Council, but you're representing what you say you're representing. So let me ask you a question. Who does the Millennium Council represent?
The representatives of Millennium Council is representing the issue of Rastafari, where the issues of the community rights are concerned.
I didn't ask you what, Prophet Greg. I didn't ask you what. I asked you who. Who does the Millennium? Yes.
Represent is Rastafari issues. That's what I said. Who?
That is what. When you put issues on it, it becomes what. It's simply English. I am asking you who. Who does the Millennium Council represent? Who does the Millennium Council speak for?
Who is who, Angela, Sister Angela? Who is who?
You tell me. There's a question I'm asking.
And I'm telling you, Rastafari is not what is.
Oh, Rastafari. Okay,
yes, Rastafari, the community, Rastafari.
Who is it? Who is it? Who's it?
You asking me who?
You don't understand what is what? Who is it?
No, but you're asking me who the council represents, and I'm telling you, Rastafari.
No, you said Rastafari issues. You said
Rastafari.
You want me to play about the tape? Do you want me to play about the tape? No. You said Rastafari issues.
Rastafari.
No, that's a new answer. No, that's a new answer. That's a new answer, and I will go with it. So who is the 12th tribe representative on the council?
That's Becky Wright and Stangy David.
Who's the Nyabingi representative?
Sister Mitzi Ratcott, Ireland.
All right, and all the other houses of Rastafari are represented?
Not all. Majority of them is there.
All right, tell me which houses are represented.
Jelanie Niah, you have even they have organizations like the Rastafari Indigenous Village. You have also the Howard Theocracy governments of Rastafari. You have Royal Judah Coptic there. You have even representation from the EWF, which is not a mansion, as we know. So there are a lot of, as I said, the major ones that are involved there.
All right, thank you. All right, thank you very much, Prophet Greg. Thanks for calling.
Can we talk about the Pinnacle issue, Sister Andrea? That is what we were here to discuss.
No, you were not in, Prophet Greg. You were not scheduled to speak on this program. So what do you mean you're here to discuss? I have to go. I have to. Right, I will do that another time. Thank you very much. All right, it's an interesting situation that this gentleman called in response to something I said, and I gave him close to 45 minutes. He spent the first 10 minutes talking about Pinnacle, but at the end of the day, he's saying that he has not spoken about Pinnacle. And this is in an effort to leave from here and to distort exactly what happened here. We have a tape. If anybody have questions about how this conversation went down, we have this recorded. We will play it frame by frame so that you can hear it back. I say to my sister Mitzi, I don't know where you stand on all of these issues, my sister, but if you are the chair of the Millennium Council, then I think you should stand up strongly and speak as a chair of the Millennium Council and don't let anybody push you out. All right, quick break.
To free the mind of the people. Speak to the mind of the people. Speak truth.
Black power can only be achieved, can only be materialized through African unity. Black power can only be materialized through African unity. We're back with you inside of the Africa Forum, and thank you very much, folks on Twitter who have been lighting up Twitter with like a storm. We're seeing them, and our Facebook page is there. Andrea Williams, thank you very much for making your comments, for posting, and also Running African. We're on the 107s, 107.1, and we go all the way through to 107.9. And also our telephone numbers, 974-5051, 5079, and 5043. Also 618-0352. All right, in this segment of the program, I Am That I Am, reclaiming our African identity. And joining me in the studio, quantum physicist, and we are calling him, and he is, you don't use the title, but you're an Egyptologist.
That's correct.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So that for this program, that is what you are.
Okay, yes. That's my identity, this program.
Yes. Thank you very much, Professor Paton Duncan. And we had said earlier that while we're talking about reclaiming our African identity, a little bit more about you that we haven't talked about, because you've been here twice before, that we haven't talked about a lot, is your initiation in ancient Egyptian order. Talk to us about what order that is and how that initiation went, and what does that mean?
Well, it's best to begin with the late teenage years, when most people are on a quest for meaning. Who am I? Where am I going with my life? What is my purpose? And as I was growing up as a young man in Connecticut, my parents had, a few years before my 17th birthday, moved from Kingston, Jamaica to Hartford, Connecticut. I had the benefit of parents who were teachers. My mother is a psychologist, and my father mainly a historian, but also he taught philosophy, history, and in the process they were always encouraging us to study, but mainly to reflect on our own thinking. Mm-hmm. And in the process of doing that, I started to question the meaning of the religious teachings I had received, Christianity mainly. And at that time, this is in the late 80s, early 90s, was the beginning of a kind of renaissance of black consciousness. I became aware of and interacted with a lot of different groups. Mm-hmm. The Nation of Islam, Moorish Science Temple. And at the time, though the group was relatively unknown, there was a group in New York led by Ra'un Nefr Amen, which titles itself the Ausar Auset Society. Now, these are terms most people are not familiar with, but technically it would be similar to most black consciousness movements, but the direction was to reclaim identity through the study and cultivation of our ancient Egyptian wisdom tradition. And as I became more exposed to the literature in this, studying books like Stolen Legacy by George James, African Philosophy, Marcus Garvey, I became more and more intrigued that a common thread through most black consciousness movements was this notion that we had lost a high level of consciousness and identity and science in ancient Egypt, and essentially all of these groups, including African American Christian churches, talked about the importance of reclaiming our heritage. And in the process of doing that, I studied for about 7 years with the Moorish Science Temple and with the Ausar Auset society. Technically, it would be called an Egyptian wisdom school, where we taught how to read hieroglyphics, technically metu neter, how to meditate, martial arts, different techniques of breathing and diet, and it was a comprehensive system which people today would be familiar with Hindu yoga. So it could be called Egyptian yoga, which has many parallels with ancient Hindu and Ayurvedic and yoga traditions. So in the process of my personal development through these studies, I was also pursuing my study academically of mathematics and physics and the technical sciences. And these two areas over the years began to merge and in a certain sense formed a different identity than I had when I first left Jamaica. So that's kind of where my studies got started.
And then in terms of the initiation within the ancient wisdom school itself, or the ancient Egyptian order, was that a ritual, a formal ritual, or was that came at the end of it as a formal? Talk to us about, or don't you want to? You should talk to us about it.
It's interesting because a ritual in a spiritual practice is a dramatization of an internal process. So without the psychological development, mental discipline, and behavioral discipline, any ceremonial activity is only symbolic. The analogy I want to make is a high school diploma, and it's very similar. You go through a set of studies. You have to regulate your lifestyle, how you eat, when you go to bed. And in the process, you are actually changing your neuropsychology. You begin to react to things differently. And I'll give you one typical example. There is a meditation exercise that is called Menab Em Onk Em Mat, which in English would translate as keeping your heart stable so that you can live the truth in a conflict or crossroads situation.
Yes, I should have done that in the last interview.
It sounded like you had a lot of restraint, however.
I had a lot of restraint, yes.
And so we are born with a tendency to react, you know, to get angry at the slightest provocation. But to be a leader, to be a guide to people, to be a teacher, one has to overcome the primitive, if you will, hypothalamic response, the lower hemisphere, and the reptilian fight or flight response. So initiation dramatizes this by placing the individual in situations where, like the interview you had recently, you would, at the same time that someone is being, let's say, belligerent or maybe not as complimentary as they should, one would know from your studies and spiritual practice that in your breathing and in how you are yourself reacting, instead of just being impulsive, a kind of stimulus response, you would have a third response. Stimulus, reflection, and then response. And this can be carried to very high levels.
Yes, yes. All right, so that we talk about you and call you Professor Paton Duncan all the time, but you have reclaimed your African identity on many, many levels, and that includes also your name. And so that would be what?
Oh, that's interesting, though. To mention the name, many people might be familiar with Malcolm X's biography and Spike Lee's movie X. If one watches a movie like that, as particularly for African people or people of the diaspora, he went from being called Malcolm Little, and when he became a pimp and a hustler and a thief, he took on the new street name Chicago Red.
Yes.
And you can actually watch in the film how his childhood identity, Malcolm Little, somewhat afraid. His father had been killed and he was in a world of confusion. His mother suffered from a mental illness and being put in an orphanage, versus his new identity as a criminal. Mind you, he was a criminal, but he had confidence, he had a purpose, and he had a direction. The naming process is one in which one rediscovers a consciousness, a purpose, and a direction that is more expansive, more inclusive of the reality around you, and also more stabilizing to one's sense of inner balance and peace. So in my case, I identify with teaching. And instead of just looking at myself as a teacher, I wanted a name that would reflect my identity as someone who teaches, but from the orientation of an Afrocentric perspective.
Yes.
And it's interesting how the name came about. Yeah. I was reading an Egyptian text about the medical college of Imhotep, and I came across the word Sabut, S-A-B-H-U-T.
Yes.
And the translation was a healer and a teacher. And I said, that's interesting. A teacher is a healer.
Yes.
So I just started calling myself Sabut with my friends.
Yes.
And one day I spoke to the famous Afrocentric philosopher, metaphysician, and naturopath, Dr. Phil Valentine, who many of us may be aware of. I was calling him and having a conversation on the phone about time travel and all kinds of interesting topics. And he said to me, why do you call yourself Sabut? He wanted to know if I understood the meaning behind the name.
Yes.
And when I described it, he said, very good. If you had not told me that, I would just see you as a hip-hop artist, you know, a guy who calls himself Prince or King. And then he pointed out that the T is actually silent. When you speak a word, the end of the word should be an expression of your relationship to the universe. So I didn't know this, that when you pronounce the word Sabut, disempower you. So it's actually Dr. Valentine who gave me the name Sabut. And as a mathematician, in my Egyptian teachings from my elders, they gave me the name Ma'at. So that's how I was given the name Sabu Ma'at, teacher of math or mathematics. And that's what I do in my public career and in my own personal life.
So that we have, tell me what the title is, and the entire name is Saku Sabu Ma'at Heru Amen.
That's correct.
Right. And so together it means?
Every part of the name refers to, excuse me, it refers to an attribute and a quality that the individual is meant to activate, to articulate in their life. So the Saku refers to the pursuit of the knowledge of the essence of reality. Ku in Kemetic or ancient Egyptian is a name for wisdom. Za means to follow. Zaku or Saku means to follow wisdom. And then Heru, people know the word hero, to try to be heroic in the good sense of the word, to overcome obstacles. And then the what can you repeat? I want to make sure I'm.
No, I just wanted to, the entire the name, what it meant together.
Well, so, as a totality, that's interesting.
Yes.
One's understanding of one's name grows with one's identity. So the name itself would refer to the overcoming of obstacles, not through force, but through the.
We are getting numerous threats by telephone. So people are calling in. They have identified themselves as being of a particular faith or liberty or movement. We're not going to say that name because I know that my brothers and sisters of that faith, liberty movement, do not threaten in this way. They have said, and I quote, them are come burn down irie FM, and that them are go bomb up irie FM. And this is in relation to the conversation we had with Prophet Greg. Now, Prophet Greg is not the one who's making these threats. We need to make that very, very clear. Prophet Greg is not the one who's making these threats. These threats are coming from elsewhere, threats to bomb, to burn down, to harm, and to do hurt. We announce that here, and we're also going to be reporting it to the police because we feel that it is a police matter at this point. All right.
Speak truth to the people. To identify the enemy is to free the mind. Free the mind of the people. Speak to the mind of the people. Speak truth.
All right, so we're talking about reclaiming our African identity. And Professor Paton Duncan, Egyptologist, is in the studio to help us to understand that. We heard a little bit about his own journey in terms of the reclamation process. Who is, and what does it mean to be African?
To be African from the point of view of initiation and spiritual development is to transcend tribalistic and materialistic thinking and to identify oneself with the divinity that has given birth to the universe and our creative genius. It is not a linguistic category. It is not based on regionalism, nor is it based on the historical situation of African people. From the spiritual or metaphysical point of view, being African in its full sense is the realization of one's inner potential to transform and to transform the world around oneself. Mm-hmm. I am not using a sociological definition, in other words. Mm-hmm. My perspective is a cosmological definition, which is usually never referred to, hence the tribalism and the sense of conflict we tend to have within the African movement, because too much of the identity is with regional and not with cosmological ontology. The great Africans of the past were acknowledged as great, not because of their regionalism, but because of how they were inclusive of the human family and therefore expressive of a divine consciousness, direction, and purpose.
So that Africa, to be African is to go beyond, you talk about regionalism, but also geographic borders.
Yes.
And I hear you talk about divinity, understanding that, or divine, the divineness. So that the African personality is also a spiritual personality.
Oh, I would say that the African personality is essentially a spiritual personality. When you look at the great artistic, musical, scientific, and architectural creations of African people, from its origins in the birth of civilization to this very day, it has not been considered African to simply be able to articulate the situation of a tribal or regional ideology. The greatness of Nelson Mandela, for example, or Imhotep from long ago, was recognized because of the way they express an ineffable quality, yet its relevance to the regional situation. Nelson Mandela, though a lawyer and a civil rights activist and a human rights activist and an African nationalist, would not be recognized for just that alone. It's because he, in his stature, his courage, and his ability to express the Ma'at principle of justice to all and for all transcends even the notion of a regional African. That's why his message is relevant and his life is relevant to the Chinese. Imhotep's medical practice is used today at Harvard Medical College in the Hippocratic Oath, as they call it, that doctors are not to harm their patient and as much as possible preserve human life. Those were the words of Imhotep. Therefore, Africanness in a great degree is the truth about being a human being. So to deny Africa in any form is to deny humanity.
So what role does, in terms of what the African personality and the African, we're using personality and we don't want to use personality and identity interchangeably because we know they're not necessarily so. But what does the African personality embody? And we're looking, for example, at historical memory.
Yes.
How important and how relevant is that to the African?
It's very relevant. And sometimes people get confused and go into a kind of transcendental detachment. Okay, if that's true, we don't really need to know African languages or art forms or cultural forms. To the contrary, the personality is the medium of expression of the identity. They are not the same. So if the vehicle of expression, which is African culture, is guided by a spiritual identity, then you have the Ma'at principle at work, the principle of harmony. But if you articulate an ideology of division through the same African symbols and forms, you are not expressing the true African identity. And you could look African, walk African, and be a world leader who is a genocidalist. You could be a hip-hop artist who is talking about Africa, but pushing the sale of cocaine in his own community. I won't name anybody.
No, but we can name them because we see the drone strikes coming from Barack Obama, even while he spoke at Nelson Mandela's funeral about peace and unity and so on. Drones were being dropped on Pakistan and Yemen, and yet still, but we say we have there's the first black president of the United States and so on. So you're saying so the Africanness and the African identity, the African personality, is not contingent on how you dress. How you present, how you look.
The symbol and the sign, it is a dialectic that we have to be aware of and discern, that you may have a presentation that is actually contradictory to the essence of what African culture is about. You cannot bomb a community of humans of any kind. You are harming life, and at the same time use words of peace. You see, in ancient Kemet, they talked about Ishfetu. Ishfetu was their word for evil, and it means to have a divided heart. There's a prayer in the Book of Coming Forth by Day, which is miscalled or misidentified as the Book of the Dead. May I not have two hearts. May I not walk the road of two paths. This idea of two-ness has to do with speaking a word that you are not truly married and identified to have a heart that is not balanced.
Yes, and one of the things that I say in this space a lot is that we are not who we say we are, but we are who or what we do.
Exactly.
At the end of the day. So, so that the historical memory is important. How is the... So you talk a lot about, and you've said this a few times in this conversation, talking about the African culture. What is the African culture, and is there such a thing as an African culture?
Well, culture, in its historical expression, is a very diverse manifold of languages, art forms, and philosophies. Yet at the same time, this many has its root in a oneness. The difficulty for us today is we live in a culture of division and segregation. Many people have said, for example, to the famous Senegalese nuclear physicist and Egyptologist Sheikh Anta Diop, who wrote the book Civilization or Barbarism, in which he articulated the following idea. When we speak of African culture, we are not saying that there's only one language or one mode of expression. We're saying that beyond that diversity, there is a fundamental unity, and he defined it. A belief in a transcendent spirit that is, if you will, the source of life, that has many names and forms, yet is essentially one reality. An expression of that through art and nature around us. You can articulate, in other words, a notion of a unified African culture which has many modes of expression. And people need to grow into that. It's not an idea you're going to learn from TV or from essentially academic orientations, because these are segregationist and divisive modes of thinking. We need to get back to that unifying original identity that is African genius, the unified field, if you will.
So that the African identity is intrinsically connected to and wound up in the African unity.
Yes, it is.
That unity is what we say is the ultimate goal.
A word that is very rare today.
So then, what constitutes us as what constituted us as African and continue to constitute us as Africans?
Well, I'm going to quote from another ancient Egyptian text by the book of Ptahhotep. They call it the oldest book in the world, in which it said that what the Creator loves is not much talking, but the devoted heart which expresses itself in silence, but through actions that promote peace. The African identity, therefore, is not about what you're saying about Africa, you know. If you're not committed to the development of schools, to the promotion of community understanding, to the cultivation of independent businesses, and you show it in your actions, you can't claim African identity. Because the greatest of Africa's achievements is the building of a community where children can grow from childhood to adulthood and to genius, to expressions of like music and pyramids and symphonies. Bob Marley, I'll just cite him as one example. His birthday just recently passed. You have to cultivate the human if you will, technology, not just the machine or the political infrastructure. How are you improving the quality of human life in your community?
And it reminds me of a song by Safi Abdullah. We played a lot in this space. I probably need to find it this morning to play, called Africa is Burning, where he talks about Africa is burning and the black man here is doing the freak. And then he says, we talk about dress up in Elton John sunglasses and hairstyles and so on, not understanding that there's more to being African than just talking about it.
Yes.
So that you talk about the African identity, including the need and the will to build communities.
That's right.
And so in that regard, what role does education and miseducation play in forming or destroying the African identity?
Well, it's interesting. When we speak of education, we have to be aware of the duality. What is the source of the content of your curriculum? And what also is the direction and intent of the outcome of that teaching? By looking across even Jamaica, generally across the world, education is directed towards the marketplace by its own propaganda. Get a better job, you'll be successful. That only refers to the lowest in the hierarchy of human needs. Physical survival. What about the other levels of human development? Do we really learn how to transcend conflict? Do we learn how to support and foster the development of our creative and spiritual sides? Education, therefore, is essential, but what kind? And education first has to build the community of the inner self in order to build the community of the outer self. Without that, education can continue to promote division in the community and maledictions in the mind. We cannot be healthier than our education system. So if our system is corrupted, it's a reflection of the lack of inner balance and personal development at the human level. And that's the bridge that has to be gapped.
And we talk about education and how do we... and how does this work? In terms of the African identity and the African personality, we claim those spaces of knowing in terms of our identity, because we're dealing with Eurocentric ideology, Eurocentric ideals. How does the African identity inform the individual or the collective to reclaim the spaces of knowing?
Yes. Well, essentially, if we look at the definition of the human, he has to be considered, he or she, not only from a physical, economic, and social level. The curriculum we teach has to have an orientation that its purpose is to build a spiritual leader who is competent in economic and scientific areas, but whose essential foundation is one that is a commitment to something beyond their personal success. If children are taught this from the very beginning, then we won't have brain drain where the best and the brightest and the most talented leave Jamaica to build other economies. We won't have criminal geniuses as graduating classes from a lot of our schools, because the moral side of learning and the commitment to the development of other people isn't really an integral part of our institutionalized. We talk about it as a mission statement, but where do they actually teach in our schools how to overcome conflicts with others, how not to express oneself violently or make threats, for example? Do we teach people to remember their heritage by actually having a class about the importance of knowing who Marcus Garvey is? We know about CXC. Is there a CXC exam called African? Oh, I got a 1 in my African history CXC. Where is it? Because unless there is an actual concrete assessment that is supported by our schools to measure your African identity, we're just talking rhetoric then. Because no one is testing it as an outcome, we cannot claim, why do our students not remember Jamaican culture and history? There is no such course that is directed to a student in any of our schools. You may have a Black History Month event, but I don't see continuous, sustained, assessment-based curriculum structure built around African history, Jamaican heritage, art, music, culture, spirituality. Look at the weight of our curriculum. There's very little direct institutional support for the ideas that we're discussing. And many people should realize that if you don't invest in something, it cannot flourish.
So why such an understanding of our African our Africanness crucial and critical to understanding or to embracing our own consciousness as an African people, as a people who we are? Because one of the things that the idea is to first of all identify who we are. Why is this understanding of African identity and Africanness critical to coming into that consciousness?
Because it will save our lives. If one does not identify with one's original culture, the cultures you tend to identify with, which are not oneself, would be like an animal that is eating plants or living in an environment foreign to its true nature. Now, you cannot plant an apple tree in a desert. And if you look at our society, look at what the results of that identification are leading to. The question isn't one of style, in other words. It's essential to our spiritual well-being and our physical well-being that we reconnect to the root. A plant that has been cut off from its roots cannot live. To quote Marcus Garvey, a people without knowledge of their history can't... Listen, when I teach, a lot of times I ask my students, do you know who Imhotep was? They have never heard of him except for the Hollywood movie. And in
that, he's a negative.
It's a negative
portrayal.
Image of him as some kind of sorcerer, not as a healer, not as a doctor, because the images we are given around us are dangerous and very poisonous images. Look at what they're doing to our children. Shouldn't we replace this with healthy forms for them to identify with? Our leaders, our historians, our scientists, our great achievers. That forms a healthy identity.
Instead of feeding,
why it's essential.
So the images are also very important in forming that identity. A lot of our children feed on the Eurocentric images that we see on the Disney Channel, which I think the Disney Channel is the most harmful of every channel ever for young black minds. But our children are fed a steady diet of this. What does that do then to impair, to disembody, to dismember the African?
The basis of academic performance is not simply how much a child studies, but it's their level of self-esteem. A high-achieving student who has a low self-esteem will perform on a failing level. In other words, it affects our children because it prevents them from achieving the academic heights that they can, because inside they are not identified with healthy images, they are disoriented. When you talk to them individually, students who are having difficulty in school, you begin to discover there's very little positive reinforcement of their identity, very little validation, and hence, once that is corrected, their performance becomes astronomical. I'll use myself as an example. Most of my education, I failed mathematics until the 10th grade. Now imagine, graduation is usually 10th or 11th grade. So what was going on? Throughout most of my life in the U.S. as a elementary school student and beginning of high school, I was never told I could do well in math. As a matter of fact, when I failed, I even remember a teacher saying, well, you probably never do good at math. Now, later, when I received positive reinforcement and began to see that I could do it and start to believe in myself, my confidence went up. I didn't change how I studied, I didn't learn a new trick or technique. I just felt better about myself. And look, today, I'm teaching people at college and high school level. A person achieves their height only when they feel within themselves the highest. And the highest we can feel is that we are embodiments of divinity.
Is there a way to heal ourselves spiritually from these negations?
I saw a movie where a man woke up one day and looked in the mirror and he said to himself, look at you. You're brilliant. You're strong. And, man, you're the baddest man out there. Like, he's basically giving himself positive affirmations. And his wife in the background says, I really can't believe that's what you do before you go out to work. I'm using it as an example that we can become our own mind control CNN news system. Just as the media shows us negative images, we need to put positive images around ourselves. We need to play music. We need to listen to lectures. We need to listen to irie FM. We need to focus on sources of information and nourishment that give us spiritual power, if you will, the strength to overcome poverty, the strength to overcome low scores in school. Maybe mom is not at home, maybe dad is not at home, but guess what? Mama and Papa is within you. You have the father-mother principle within you. The ancient Kemetics said, we are not flesh, we are not earth, we are beings made of starlight. Now imagine if I identify with the stars, that means I can look up to who I am. If I identify with the criminal or the corrupt leader, I'm looking down. And that means I will not rise higher than my vision. We need to lift our vision from the level of the problem to the level where the solutions are and heal ourselves.
And that healing is possible through...
Absolutely. We have so many examples from history and our current life today of people who've overcome these obstacles through the transformation of their identity.
What role does social institutions play in that healing process?
Well, that's a powerful question, because what we now call religion and spirituality were the socializing institutions of the ancient past, When you look at an Egyptian temple, you're looking at what we would now call the Social Development Commission. People didn't just walk in there and chant and whatnot. No. You have to realize that our social and human service agency should be the source of these transformative ideas. When you have a project and go into a community area to do conflict resolution, or you're going to build a soccer field or cricket, you also go there as someone who should be healing, someone who should be teaching the young people. You don't need to draw a gun. Talk about your different... Let's have a round table. What about this fight are you invested in? Do you really want to hurt this individual? Have the young people see us as people who they can go to for mentoring and guidance, and not that we're coming as social service providers. No. That label needs to be removed.
I do agree with you. So we talk about African, that the death or the killing, the murder, let me say that, of the African child. I know that there is... In Canada, for example, many moons ago, not so long actually, because we had Canada apologizing for this, that they forcibly removed American Indian children from their home and put them into boarding school miles away from their parents. And when Harper was apologizing for that, he said what it was the killing of the Indian in the child. So the murder of the African in the child, who are now adults and children who continue to be murdered, not physically, but the murder of the African. What about the African identity as forms of resistance to this? How does the African identity manifest as a form of resistance to the murder of the African child?
Now, there are many modes of resistance. There are violent modes of resistance, but resistance can take a variety of forms. Some of them are very destructive, and others aim towards restoring peace. I want to cite the example of Desmond Tutu and the peace and reconciliation model, which has been used to bring groups that have been literally shooting at each other. Violent conflict in South Africa during and after the apartheid regime.
But which still left the African in more or less similar conditions to apartheid. I mean, apartheid is dead, long live apartheid. So in the end, at the end of the day, looking back, what did that really do?
Well,
what kept the African...
It was used, I believe, in isolation, because a holistic approach doesn't just involve discussing the conflict. It also involves bringing the offenders to justice. If, in fact, I stole your land, and as a result of that, generations of fighting have been going on, it's not enough to just bring the warring parties together to talk about their differences. The land needs to be restored.
Yes.
The concept of ma'at is not just some kind of a new age, let us, we don't really have to worry about the land anymore because we are people of spirit. No. What I'm referring to is that justice still needs to be applied.
Yes.
Unless there is a conception of how to realize material justice, there can be no conception of spiritual harmony. This is very different than the usual concept of forgive and forget. You can forgive, but that is not divine order to simply allow the offenders to continue taking the land, to continue poisoning the water, to continue not distributing the wealth that was taken from the South African people through the mining of diamonds and precious metals. Unless that's done, our activity of peace and reconciliation is a sham.
So that the African identity in itself is a form of resistance.
Yes, it is. It's
and especially in the diaspora,
it's an intellectual,
or where you have colonization. Yes.
Absolutely. And we have to be careful because there are many, if you will, false forms or what you might call images of resistance that don't have the substance. You can have a peace march, but changing the legislation as was done in the United States during the civil rights era isn't really enough. It's not that it shouldn't happen, but beyond that, does the identity of the oppressive leadership and the class of people that benefited from the apartheid and segregationist regimes, has that been addressed? Because if you look at the media today, it's very rare to find a black news reporter in the United States. Why? Because over time, the same kinds of racialist divisions have reasserted themselves because they've only gone underground. The individual has to be addressed. Just as we as Africans need to reclaim our African identity, other cultures that have imperialistically imposed themselves on Africa and other places, they have some reconciliation on a spiritual level to do as well. It isn't just a question of our, if you will, burden. So the balance here has a lot more to do with justice than just merely psychology and spiritual development.
And as we come to the last minute of this conversation, so if you were to encapsulate what the African identity is, and I suppose it is fluid, but I'm sure that we can catch it.
Actually, it's not so much fluid as much as one first has to reject and deny the current definitions that you have accepted, even if they are ones you think are good, and dare to go back into the past, not just of your immediate family or Jamaica's history, but into Africa's past, and try to find out who you really are. Are you spiritual, material, or economic? Or are you really African? And does our audience who are listening understand that Africa is more than just a word? Just like peace, it's an action. And you can only achieve it when you begin to treat people around you as human and spiritual beings. In the name of Africa, Ma'at, reclaim our identity.
And we've been saying going beyond the geographical spaces, the geographical borders, in terms of reclaiming the African identity, the physical boundaries and spaces.
Yes, it begins there, but its end is not there.
There's so much more to talk about. It's about Sankofa, to return to the source, but not just to return to the source,
and bring the best of what you have learned to heal your community.
Right.
Find your Ma'at, find your Sabu Ma'at, find your name. And when you have found a name that gives you the power to overcome your past, creates a different future than the one that has been imposed.
And it's interesting, because you're talking about finding your Sabu Ma'at, and I am now, as you know, changing my name in the process of this with the assistance of Attorney Bert Samuels, changing my name and reclaiming my African identity as Kabu Ma'at Keru.
That was interesting.
Yes, it's very interesting because I found out that you were Sabu Ma'at just last week.
Similar.
Yes, and our names are very, very similar.
Yes.
and you've had yours forever. All right. Thank you very much, Professor Paton. We really want to invite you back to continue this conversation. Saku Sabu Ma'ateru Amen. We want to have you back to continue this conversation on African identity.
Yes.
I think we're not finished.
Marcus Garvey.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, my brother. All right. So there, you know him as a quantum physicist, Professor Paton Duncan, but initiated in the ancient Egyptian orders and is Saku Sabu Ma'ateru Amen. And he, as I said before, I'm sure, will return to continue this conversation on how we reclaim our African identity. I want to take this conversation into Pan-Africanism and Pan-African spirituality as resistance to the negations that we've talked about, especially in the concept of the context of the diaspora. Quick break. We'll be right back.
Red hot deals now on at Rapid True Value and Agri-Grace stores. Get big discounts on lumber, houseware, paint, seeds, power tools, and much more. Hurry, sale ends February 28th. The time by Rapid True Value and Agri-Grace is...
Now 8:44 and 38 seconds. Natalie Campbell is standing by with the local and international headlines. Still to come inside of the program, we're going to be hearing from Angela Stolz. And as we said before, next week is the big event in Portland at Somerset Falls. And we're going to be heading there. All roads are leading to Portland next week, Sunday, for Fuwasinting. It is on. And one of the charities of the Fuwasinting Foundation is the Rosetown Built Environment Foundation. They have been assisting Rosetown for a while. And Angela Stolz will be joining us on the phone line to talk about that later on in the program. Time now, 8:45, time for the local and international headlines.
Gong Howell led his people so well, it is the gong who pointed us to the conquering lion. From the streets of Port Morant, Trinityville, he was forced to bring his message to the hills of Sligoville. Him say organize, centralize for we the African society cast him off as a madman. Gong said, look to Ethiopia, your black king has been crowned. Upon him, the state-sponsored terrorists frowned. Him say, love one another, malice shouldn't keep pre-dawn raid when the people were asleep. Oh well, face L, but him them couldn't trick. Raids, beatings, asylum, dunked him tongue, them try split. King Alpha and Omega, Promise Key, First Rasta, state-sponsored terrorists, destroyed, plotted, bun dung, farm, marijuana, gongo peas, Neesberry, oranges, and banana. Communal living for we the Africans, overall part of Gong's plan. Teaching the people their ancestry, government turn him life in living misery. Fleeing the hilltop down to Tredegar Park with his message of love no war. Right there saw the problem start. In the black man's sky, he was a star. Jail time, on top of jail time, the gang spent. But nowhere from his mind the Rasta message went. Him teach the people to be clean when you go on the street. Rid them of cholera and yas, then send them along their feet back to the street. Doctor for the small man, shepherd of the sheep, legit businessman, for him we shall surely weep. Oh well, led the people so well, it is a gang who pointed us to the conquering lion.
You know what? I don't play with the sportscasters and the sports editors and the sports reporters at irie. You know, it's a serious business. Because a man is what he is. You know, I am that I am. Mm-hmm. So that this came out of your research. And what this is very informative and educational. You know that? Yes. You see how me and Joy are listening intently.
Yes, I just realized.
Yes. Yeah, we get goosebumps when you say split him tongue and so on. Yeah. And all of that is going to come out in the documentary. Just a synopsis. But you couldn't help yourself.
No.
Because here you are in the deep in the research.
Yes.
And
well, because going to Pinnacle, you know, it just gives you a whole new lease and a whole new look on how things are. You know, and to know that you know, back in those days when a black man tried to own that amount of land and the persecution that he faced, you know, it deeper than we think, you know.
And that is why, regardless of all the isms and the schisms around this, one thing we are sure of, that this is a place where the Rastafari movement, the Rastafari liberty was fostered.
Yes.
And as a result, and I like the phrase from Clinton Houghton, that it is the geographical faculty of Rastafari, and as such must be a heritage site, must be much more than even what we're hearing proposing. Bubba Gregg mentioned some of the proposal that they sent to Babsy Grange and over time, and I think you know, stuff like that, information coming from that could be useful.
Definitely.
If we could just stop and find time to not be uniformed, but to find some unity.
Definitely.
so that you know, this is for the greater good, the sonum bonum. This is not just, you know, for a one group or one this is Rastafari is bigger than Jamaica, you know that?
Yes. Definitely.
Rastafari is a global movement, and why Jamaica must recognize this place, Pinnacle, as such, as a geographic faculty of Rastafari. I mean, we could talk about that forever. We could go on and on and on about that, and I think we're going to hear some of that even coming out through your documentary. Yes. We've been trying to have these conversations before, but it cannot be an individualistic thing. This must be about the collective now.
It has to be, and one of the mantra was organize, centralize. You know,
yes, man.
I mean, organize, centralize. We don't know how much more we can hit that in the people's head. Organize, centralize.
That's why we cannot afford for personalities and egos to hijack anything. I heard Stephen Golding, you know, on CVM, because you saw him in that report, and he was asked by Simon Crosskill, who are you? What interests are you representing here? Well, he said Leonard Howell was a member of UNIA. We can talk about that. There's a lot there to talk about. The extent to which Leonard Howell couldn't even sell the pictures of Haile Selassie on the steps of Idlewild. We have to talk about it. You know why we have to talk about everything? Because this is a cauterization process. We're digging out the sore. A bandage was on the thing and the pus was overflowing. So we're digging out the sore and we're cleaning it out, and we're going to put ashes in there and squeeze lime in there. And if we have to put salt in there so that it burn, everything that, you know what I call it?
We have to purge it out.
We have to purge it out.
Yes.
And leave it open for a while till we can't just bandage it like that.
Exactly.
Make sure so we see the corner start heal and so on, you know, or them something like that.
Yeah,
so we have to talk about these issues. But Stephen Golding also has to watch his language. I hear him saying that he's representing the Negroes. Which Negro?
No.
Which Negro?
Not a proper terminology, but
we have to.
Hope is a slip of the tongue.
No, we slip of the tongue. I mean, the members of UNIA in Jamaica must stop using the word Negro. Even Mother Saman said it a long time ago. The N in UNIA in this time must mean Nubian. In this time, when Marcus Garvey was walking the earth, I mean, Negro was progressive. It was on the way from being called nigger.
Yes, because it
being
also,
lynched.
Yeah, and it also came out of this whole social Darwinism theory. Where, you know,
the classification, but I'm talking about even how we refer to ourselves now. So Negro is not who we are. We are Africans and proud to be so.
Definitely.
We're Nubians and proud to be so. So don't represent any Negro, Mr. Stephen Golding. You are very articulate and he spoke very well. I agree with everything almost that he said on that program. Yes, he spoke very, very well. But he cannot continue to represent Negroes.
I agree. Right. I mean, the Negro thing not working in this.
We have to be very careful now, man. Word sound is power. We claiming our African identity. All right, thank you, my brother.
Oh, yes, not a problem.
Yes,
I hope you like a little poem.
I didn't say it?
Yes, man, you did.
Oh,
but
okay. Certainly did. This one. So we're going to be talking later on in the program to my brother Jelanie Niah, Dr. Jelanie Niah. He's just returned from a 3 or 4, I think, country tour of Africa, from the 8th Pan-African Congress in Africa. And, you know, we were linking with him on his journey. And he's with us in the studio this morning, but he's going to be talking about the recommendations of the Ganja Commission, the 2001 recommendations, but also to situate this within the Peter Tosh tribute. And here's the African coming in now. Greetings, my brother. Greetings, greetings. Touch with the Ethiopian touch, man. Hey. Thank you. Sonny, I can't tell you what going on just now. All right. So, so he's going to be talking about the recommendation of the Ganja Commission, but also to talk about the Peter Tosh relevance of Peter Tosh to this whole debate that is now resurfacing on the decriminalization or legalization of marijuana. In the meantime, though, we're going to talk quickly to Angela Stolz, project manager for the Rosetown Built Environment Foundation, and this is in relation to Fuisinting. Fuisinting is happening next week for the Rosetown Built Environment Foundation. She and the team, the Rosetown youths, will be at Fuisinting next week, Sunday, and they are at least part of the charity of the Fuisinting charity foundation. All right, Angela, good. My sister, how are you?
Greetings, Andrea. I'm good. Thank you.
Yes, long time. You came in the studio long time ago, and you have not returned.
Well, here I am now.
Here you are on the phone line, but guess what? We're going to get you back in the studio.
All right,
in those Gideon boots of yours.
I hear you.
All right, listen. So, you quickly tell us about Rosetown. What is the Rosetown Built Environment Foundation?
Okay, the Rosetown Foundation for the Built Environment was established in 2009 by the Prince's Foundation, Prince Charles, as an agency to help the Rosetown residents themselves transform their community into one which they'll be proud of.
Yes.
So we're using a multifaceted approach. Education being top on the list, land tenure programs to transform people who have been living on property for over 15, 20 years and are seen as technical squatters, to transform that into legal tenure so that they can access National Housing Trust and other loans that are available for persons who have collateral.
Okay.
So it's land tenure, built environment, which includes water and sewage, the education, life skills, training in construction, so as to enhance community development as well as income generation activities.
And Fuisinting, which is held every year for the last 20-odd years now, has now, and we've seen Fuisinting develop too, so that it now has a Fuisinting Foundation. And the foundation has now developed a relationship with the Rosetown group. Tell us about that relationship.
It is wonderful because the Rosetown Foundation, the education that we have for children is in a very holistic way. It is recognizing the absence of life skills for this generation, and teaching them in addition to the literacy and numeracy thing, but life skills in building their identity, their comprehension level, and who are we as a generation. And so it's really a great partnership that we have now with Sister P and Fuisinting, that we can take children from inner city community, Kingston, all the way to Portland, and get them to interact and to socialize with children from different communities, different era, different class level. But just as Peter Tosh said, whether you're light skin, brown, as long as you are a black man, you're an African.
Right.
Yeah? And it is creating that opportunity for learning in an environment in which they enjoy. And the information they get, therefore, is easily to digest because they really enjoy themselves.
Right. And what have you noticed over the years that they have been going in terms of their response to this, what they've learned, and how they're implementing that?
Well, this is the second year for us that we are doing the trek. The learning is coming back and being really, really feeling good about themselves.
Yes.
It is the stories that they learn, the storytelling that they sit down under a tree and listen to Sister Amina saying stories of Africa and who we are, and learning more, and coming back feeling proud and liking how they look, because this is the exposure that they yearn for, that they're able to see other people who really look like them and look like them happy to look like them. Them don't see no bleach face.
and those are positive images.
And it is
reinforce.
positive. It is reinforcing positive image.
How many
reinforcing positive stories that they need to learn.
How many young people do you take there?
We take an average of 30.
Right. Okay. And
30 young persons go off, and they come back. And when they come back, they have to write a story about the experience.
Oh,
what have they learned? And what did they learn that was new?
Yeah.
And the stories and the anecdotes, a lot of things that they say is just wonderful.
Wow.
And they look forward. They can't wait to be selected because it's so much of them that want to go. But financially, we can only afford, and the partnership with Sister P, that has helped, that totally fund this thing for them to, for them to move from Rosetown to go there.
That is brilliant. That's brilliant. Yes. Congratulations to Sister P. And thank you, Angela, for the work that you continue to do. Fuisinting is on again. So we're going to see you this year at Fuisinting. Were you there last year?
Yes, I was.
Then which part you did that I never did see? I never see it.
Well, I have 30 picnic health manager.
All right, you know what?
Yes.
What I'm very happy about going to Fuisinting this year, and I'm really over the moon about this, is that I am not working. I'm going to go there and enjoy myself.
And actually enjoy.
It will be the first time in a long time. So I make up my mind. So I'm going to walk at every food stall. I'm going to go to every craft stall. And
the African village, the storytelling, the kumina, the jargon.
I'm going to sit down with Amina Blackwood Meeks and pick them and listen to an answer story. Listen, Angela.
And transportation, it's not just helping the children in Rosum, but I think also transportation is moving from Montego Bay this year, Spanish Town, Kingston, St. Thomas, and Lime Mill in order to take as many people as possible who might think that, how can I get there to this place where I'm mixing with people who look like me and saying all of these, highlighting.
And that's good news.
The wonderful images and stories of how us as a people has contributed to building civilization.
Yes, and Sister P, I'm sure she's listening. If she could just send us those
that
information immediately. Just send it in so that we can read that, because it's next week, so people can already,
I have some of it if you want.
What do you have? Yeah, man, go ahead quickly.
Okay, from Montego Bay, the line is 953-2253. From Spanish Town, it's 577-3586. From Kingston, the line is 754-8751. And from St. Thomas, 389-6271. And then from Lime Hall in St. Anne's, the line is 324-1931. So I hope everybody is hearing this.
Yes, we'll repeat them. Please let us have them, and then we'll repeat them. So these are the numbers for where the buses are leaving from different parts of Jamaica for Fuisinting next week. We'll see you there, Angela. Of course, So we're definitely going to be there. We'll see you there. It is next week, Sunday, at Somerset Falls in Portland. Thank you, my darling. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks. Bye.
All right, quick break. We'll be right back. We gave him as much time as we possibly could, but everything's running a bit late as a result of that. Dr. Jelanie Niah, who has just returned from the continent of Africa, looking very fresh and looking very good, is now joining us in the studios. Good morning and greetings, my brother Hotep.
Good morning, Sister Andrea. Good morning, Running Africa and family. Give thanks.
Wow. Are you, when you were down there, you said to me, well, if I come back.
Well,
yes.
There's something about being in Africa, particularly if you have to transit Europe in the wintry months to do that. And you ask yourself, why are you returning to an island when you have a continent?
Wow. So, but how was it generally? We linked with you on the way before we get into the meat of the other discussions on the Ganja Commission.
It was an interesting trip. Ethiopia, as you know, is one of the fastest moving African economies. Addis in 2009 is not the same Addis in 2014. So there's rapid growth. Their dollar is adjusting fast as well, so there's inflation related to that. And then leaving from Addis to arrive in South Africa, which one would say is the measure of what the continent has achieved in terms of industrialization. You see exactly where Addis is trying to get to. and then going to Zimbabwe, which is related to the Southern African model, but somewhat interrupted, then you begin to understand some of the serious hegemonic, international, domestic, situational, the complexity of what we're faced with as a people in terms of our overall developmental model. And how to really move our nations in a way that it seems as though there is equity, which I think is our greatest challenge, that, is to manage the pace of change so that there isn't that kind of suffocation that we know exists.
One of the things we have noticed since you've come back is that, well, the European Union had said that they would not accept Robert Mugabe. They were disinviting, I think, Robert Mugabe from an upcoming summit. And the Africa Union, first time in a long time I've seen them do this, correct me if I'm wrong, stood up and said we're not going to be dictated to by the European Union, and they made a decision to name Robert Mugabe as the first chair of the Africa Union, who puts him in line for the presidency, for the chairperson of the Africa Union next time around.
And that's somewhat long overdue in terms of his own leadership. I think once Gaddafi was out of the way, one would have expected that we would have seen more direction. Politically, Mugabe, I suppose, is feared in the West.
Yes.
And but the African Union, I think, increasingly is trying to be mature. I think that 50th anniversary celebration, them reaching out to the diaspora, the whole idea of Renaissance, the location of South Africa in the executive hierarchy, I think all of that is a kind of preparation.
We must not forget China in the mix, which is really the fly in the teeth.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, the Chinese factor, is something that we have to look at scientifically as well. We've a xenophobia, I assume, as far as it relates to the continent and its well-being. But what we have seen is that everywhere where development has occurred, it has been supported or sponsored by serious investment.
I was reading about Ghana just last night, and the commentator was saying that lining the road from Kotoko International Airport into Accra, construction to no end, hotels, high-rise buildings, office buildings, commercial buildings, all in a state of almost finished, unfinished, nearly finished.
Yeah.
And that is the pace at which the development is happening in Ghana, driven by Chinese funding.
Well, I think that
China funding.
This is what the experience is in Ethiopia as well. That the expansion of road infrastructure, building infrastructure is rapid. A lot of that has been funded. I mean, you're leaving Addis to go south to Shashamane, and you're driving for about half an hour, and there is just fenced off acres upon acres of Chinese industrial park development.
And that's interesting to me, because I remember, and it was so long that I've been to Ethiopia, that is just, well, not wasteland, but, when it's open land. People telling you to be afraid of hyenas. They tell you stories about, if you ride on bike, hyena will grab your foot and take out your flesh and all. So you're not expecting buildings,
Well, that's the point, because what used to be open space, where there is investment funding that's now fenced off under whatever they're pushing. The British, some time ago, they were doing roses as a big part of this huge expansion. Well, the Chinese now have their offshore, really looking for cheap labor, industrializing and mass producing various things.
Well, I really hope that, we are not seeing the contracts, we're not seeing those, but we know that is it Kenya right now, I think it was just last night or last week, that China failed, a company, and I think also its state-run failed to turn up to court twice because of a discrepancy in a contract, and there's a clause in the contract where by the end of the day, the people of Kenya Kenya, I think it's Kenya, will not know how much money will be spent by government on a development that China is doing. And you know how the Angola model, you know how these loans go. So that and they're not being made to face that music. So does Africa have the power, or see themselves as having the power to negotiate with China and not fall into traps like this that we see unfolding there now in Kenya?
I think one of the real struggles that we're experiencing is that when it comes to investment, we're always looking at the other. I mean, we have yet to really be able to support our own development as far as financial investment is concerned. So I think where the Chinese is concerned, we certainly have the experience from colonialism and the neo-colonial period. The issue is, how much the Chinese are willing to work with what is reasonable as far as our experience tells us. And where Ethiopia is concerned, they have a really interesting culture in that you have to negotiate that society through the Ethiopian.
It would be very good to look at how they're doing things in Ethiopia.
Is a specific
because
model.
It is true that we have not heard much coming out of Ethiopia in terms of a negative.
You can't penetrate that society unless you do so through the Ethiopians. And
Angola seem to be managing pretty decently so far. I don't hear a lot coming out of Angola. The one or two things about the labor issues, and I think these are serious issues, but one would have thought that would have heard much more coming out, considering the amount of resources that Angola is shuttling into China.
Well, I think what we have is that leaders are faced with serious economic challenges, and the people are also aware of that. And in instances where there is something fueling the pocket, persons limp along. If you see in a place like Zimbabwe, which has experienced so much inflation, how creative people are with the little that they have. Much of their cars and homes are completely debt-free because they've had to find ways of negotiating their day-to-day through their own sustenance. So I'm saying that I think what we're seeing in much of Africa experiencing this rapid transition is really what Manley described as the tie belly point.
Period.
And the critical, the insensitive media gives you a sort of prejudicial view of this instead of trying to really guide the society in the way that it needs to really be able to understand long and short-term strategies and sacrifices.
All right, you can see that we have a lot to talk to Dr. Jelanie Niah about. He's here to talk about the Ganja Commission recommendation. We're doing it within the context of the Peter Tosh tribute and Peter Tosh's relevance to the debate on the legalization now of Ganja. We're going to come right back with more. Here, the theme is legalize it, and I think it's quite fitting. One of the things we said, Dr. Niah, before, when we introduced a theme a few weeks ago, is that this theme, to pay tribute to Peter Tosh, was always on the cards and came up in many conversations, but we were not bold enough to go with the theme because the time wasn't right.
Yeah.
And we found that this year, and we did say last year that the theme this year was going to be legalize it one way or the other. We're going to put our Gideon boots down and say that's what it is, because you can't do that. Continue to do that if you're going to have a theme around Peter Tosh, without going there.
Well, Andrea, the album that the track comes from was 1976.
Yes.
That's almost 40 years ago that Peter Tosh introduces this conversation. I remember last year sometime trying to gather data on the the politics around legalize it, and just trying to figure out who introduced this context. And really, it is Peter Tosh who introduces it, at least at this level. He is the one who, when the song was banned on radio, he printed the lyrics in the Gleaner.
Oh, he did? That I did not know.
He printed the lyrics of Legalize It in the Gleaner to ensure that people saw exactly what he was saying.
Yes.
So his confidence and clarity, because you're saying in 2013, 2014, we're still concerned if we can assert this. Peter Tosh is very, very clear. 40 years ago,
he was clear on that. And he was bold with it, because this was his first solo album, and it was his chance. And this is what he did. And we like that boldness. And that is Peter Tosh.
Intelligent diplomat of His Imperial Majesty, as the label is called. The boldness is given.
Yes.
But
So that he also, if you look at, I was going through the lyrics of Buckingham Palace, and I thought that also was pretty bold. And I'm reading Leonard Howell, and I'm not quite. I don't know if it's Robert Hill. Maybe not, but because I've read so much on him, that the discussion came up. People were saying that Rastafarians were sitting around and saying, make we burn it in a Buckingham Palace, so that it entered the music scene.
Well, there is Peter Tosh is interesting in this way because the narrative associating himself with the royal family and his own audacity, there is one take that he actually was sipping his chalice in Buckingham Palace. But in another one of the songs, he actually makes a reference that is linked to Queen Victoria, where he talks about it being good for, I think it's Umara Composia or something like that.
Is that Bush Doctor? Is that the song?
It's Legalize It.
It's Legalize It,
Bush
okay.
Doctor. Sorry, Bush Doctor. And that, when you track that, is a kind of euphemism for menstrual cramps.
Yes.
And the only link that you can find associated to that is a reference to Queen Victoria. Saying that she apparently is not.
But we don't talk too much about that line where, come and burn it in the House of Congress.
It's a full Babylon,
Yes.
Yeah.
So that he was thinking out of the box in a way when he was talking about, or when he sung about, what marijuana can do, what ganja can do, the medical benefits, the political implications, because he took it to Buckingham Palace and he took it to the House of Congress.
And in a way, he's engaging the very people who have repress this in their powers by suggesting this. Recently, the opposition leader made a statement about needing to hear from the State Department. What is its policy?
The House of Congress, in other words.
What is its policy?
Yes.
Instead of having us bust our brains to try and come up with something.
But I think that is a cop-out and an escape route, because I have not seen it. I've been trying to get it and access to information, and otherwise I've not been able to get it. USA website and so on, not been able to get it. But I know that the Caribbean Basin Security Initiative, because we remember the conversations leading up to that, and remember when Joe Biden flew down the last time, and when Hillary Clinton came across here on the plane and so on, that was about the CBSI. And that, a big part of that was how to protect the Caribbean waters from drug smugglers who were indeed terrorists who were funding our friend there in Venezuela. But that was what it was all about, So a lot was signed, bilateral agreements, which means that, and this is my reading of it, that there is no way that we're going to see a legalization unless we revisit those contracts, those treaties that were signed, and those MOUs that were signed just recently after the whole Tivoli Gardens upheaval, because they use that opportunity to just sign our lives away, you know that?
Well, in a sense, though, the whole engagement with the conversation, though, allows herb to be sifted out of...
Oh, sifted? That's an interesting word.
Yeah, out of the confusion of the narco-trafficking. Because framework now can help to guide. Yes. And this is in an ideal world. I mean, we're not sure what is likely to happen. And I think that this is really where revisiting Tosh and we cannot talk about ganja and not recognize that this is considered to be a spiritual food.
Yes.
You know, so it's even though we're talking about it in mundane terms, we have to recognize that it is a unique product, and in this space, Jamaica, we have had a unique relation and connection to this, and this is now what the world is expecting to hear from us. What say you, Jamaica?
But how far are we now from Peter Tosh Minagua jail for ganja no more? What say you, Jamaica? The conversation is happening at the level of the medical doctors and the private sector and so on. Mr. Chang and his group, Louis is doing a good job with the National Alliance for the Legalization of Ganja, and we have Ted Emmanuel and his son. But the conversation is happening at those levels. But what about this level, Minagua jail for ganja no more? So what say you, Jamaica, about that?
Well, I think, and this is where Rastafari has been the directing light in trying to position individuals to how it is to engage and confront the law. I mean, just the assertion that you should be able to consume this product in a ritual space at a reggae festival. I went to a reggae show in Trinidad where an elder was being arrested by a policeman who was smoking at a reggae show. I mean, I thought it was crazy. But to be able to assert that there are certain practices, the connection between reggae music production and ganja cannot be ignored or denied, and therefore to try and sanitize those spaces has to be one of the conversation, that those spaces have to be one of the included extended facilities for the appreciation of this herb.
And even to talk about those spaces, I mean, at a very simple level, we know, for example, that we've been on our way. I mean, I don't smoke ganja. My husband don't smoke ganja. We've never ever had it in our cars because we don't smoke it and so on. But I'm thinking that I've seen so many persons on my way, for example, year after year to different Pan-African events, and there's a big Pan-African event, and the police are out, and they know that people are traveling there. So they make it. It seems as if they come out especially to stop these vehicles with the red, green and gold flag, to stop them so that they can search them. Well, and you search them, and I remember, I think the last Peter Tosh event, our sister Jackie Roots was stopped, and I remember she came and she said it publicly on air. I think it was when both of us were doing that interview, actually.
Well, this is Peter Tosh's argument, that it is used as an arbitrary means of humiliating people. Because you know the culture.
And criminalizing.
Yeah, humiliating in total. Here now you are able to flaunt all kinds of legal authority over this person because of a cultural practice. And the conversation that we haven't really started to push is what quantities can we safely move with? How many trees can we plant? This is the trend that we've seen in the 20-odd states that have moved forward. They have delineated the personal liberties, which is where...
All right, we're back with you inside of the Africa Forum, running Africa and lecturer in the Institute of Caribbean Studies at the University of the West Indies. Dr. Jelanie Niah is in the studio. We're looking now in this segment of the program on the 2001 Ganja Commission. But before we get there, Dr. Niah, there have been other commissions before this in Jamaica. One or two?
Well, on Ganja Commission.
On Ganja.
The Government of Jamaica Commission in 2000 was the first of that nature.
Okay.
But there were other specific studies done.
Tell us about those studies.
Well, one of the more extensive ones was done at the turn of the 60s, early 70s by an international team, Ruben and Comitas, Lambros Comitas and Vera Ruben. And that one, interestingly, forms a part of 4 international studies that look at populations where the use of cannabis, ganja, is considered to be indigenous. That, endemic. People are, habitual users. In the Jamaica study, and this was confirmed in, I think the other one was Greece and the other one was Puerto Rico, that the performance of ones who used herb was not adversely affected. In some instances where people were engaged in manual labor, it improved their ability for certain kinds of repetitive tasks. Working men and ganja is one of the studies that comes out of that, and ganja in Jamaica is the one prior to that. But both of those studies are landmark for their clinical work. They actually had ones on wards and doing blood sample tests and psychological evaluation and a range of other sort of support, in addition to sociological work that looked at the herb. Now, the point is that all of the studies, whether they are medical or sociological, dispel the way the herb has been linked in the drug culture. That, it's not, it cannot be perceived as you would a drug. And if you go back to Peter Tosh is clear that drugs is LSD, crack cocaine. Herb is a food, or nectar of the gods, as they put it.
Yes.
But the issue is that all of the scientific work which has been done, and that's what we're seeing increasingly over the last 20 years. United States, over the last 20 years, almost 50% of the states have negotiated the concerns about ganja from a legislative point of view. And to that extent, 14 years ago, we were on the ball with the Ganja Commission, so to speak.
So that the commission, the Ganja Commission, the recommendations, I know we don't have a whole lot of time left in the program, but as quickly as you possibly can, tell me about how this was done, the methodology, and what the recommendations were.
Okay, well, the team was led by Barry Chevans and had other members of the society, Reverend Webster Edwards, Anthony Freckleton, Norma Linton, Demario McDowell, Barbara Smith as members of the commission itself. They heard testimonies from almost 400 persons and also received written submissions. And they went across the island, meeting groups in various different places. The idea was that they were to respond to the current international politics of ganja, particularly from the point of view that in this country it is a big part of the folklore and the culture. And from that point of view, it means that it was an imperative for engagement. Based on that, they were to also make recommendations coming out of these hearings as to how the government should handle the matter and what kind of initiatives would be necessary. Well, decriminalization is the first recommendation. Private, personal, small quantities by adults. This is not to encourage the smoking of the herb in general or its use by juveniles. Also to decriminalize the herb as a sacrament for religious purpose, which would immediately deal with the Rastafari representation with it. Then sustained all media, all schools, public education aimed at demand reduction, which is the basic conscious policy, as well as explaining the process of decriminalization, that security forces should intensify their work to deal with large cultivation, especially of all illegal drugs, in particular crack cocaine, but not excluding ganja. One of the ones that I think is a big one, Siobhan suggested that in order for Jamaica to maximize its location and capacity, that a cannabis research agency be set up in collaboration with other countries. So what you'll be really doing is trying to set up a center of excellence for cannabis research globally. And rightfully you could claim, whatever inroads that Jamaica has had as a part of that.
How far along are we in recognizing and implementing? I noted that in the executive summary, somewhere in the introduction, that the commission talked about the fact that the findings might not be implemented, that nothing might, it could be that nothing is done.
Well, Andrea, as we now are put on the back foot to think about this again, the terms are clearly already provided by Siobhan's. So, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, this is now to be debated as far as how high or how low.
So do we need another, I don't see another commission coming,
there
but
should be no such need.
But this document, is this document featuring prominently, where
in the conversation now?
Yeah.
Well, it has been referred to variously. In fact, the previous government had appointed a ministerial committee, Ministry of Agriculture, Tourism, Education. I think 5 ministries were named to revisit the recommendation to see how it could be implemented. So, there is clarity that there is a policy suggestion in this document, and one of the things that, and I see the Reparations Commission has drawn the same technique, major diplomatic initiatives through CARICOM and like-minded countries within and outside of the region. European Union is way ahead on these matters as well. So the point is, right now it is at strategy development at the international, political, and at the ground level here. Conversation immediately as to what does that mean for my personal liberties and how can those be operationalized, and how to take that into a conversation with the law enforcement officers, which is where we have most of the issues, that people are criminalized because of human rights. And then to build on that now, where we are starting to talk about growers, which is the sensitive thing. Who will now, after being brutalized, their fields destroyed, and this was one of the conversations out of the St. Vincent reparations meeting. After years of Rastafari persecution for believing in this herb as the healing of the nation, now that you're being told by Uncle Sam that it is the healing of the nation, what about the reparations that I and I deserve after so many decades of tribulation on that matter? So, there are a range of things, I think, to be engaged. And the commission had a good approach in going to the people. The same conversation is necessary now at the same level.
Wow, it's a pity that, and I heard you say, people are looking to Jamaica. Jamaica should be leading on this. Obviously, we're not leading on it. We're way behind time, as a matter of fact, considering what has already happened in Europe and the United States. But it's not too late, because we're still, we still have tenure. We've got something going there. So I would, I think, to me, and I haven't, scoured the report, but I have read it more than once, and I'm not. They looked at the medical. They've looked at the social issues and religious issues and so on. That I would have thought that it would have been featured more prominently, even with the questions that the opposition leader has, that I think that, I don't know if he has read it.
Well, Sister Andrea, who will lead on this?
You?
You understand what I'm saying, though. In order for Ganja to be appropriately engaged, then what it means is that you're going to have to honor and respect the very foundation ideas of a Peter Tosh and look inside them. When he said, make me the minister, I am the minister of herbs, you know, I will not only advertise it, I will defend it.
Yes.
Are we prepared to set up that kind of agency to ensure that people know that the Jamaican state has made a position that acknowledges its competitive advantage on this product and seriously trying to take it forward?
But it seems to me that the dependency that we have on the United States and the fact that we have to look to the United States and we continue to look, and I understand that you have already signed off and so many, trade agreements and so on, but why can't Jamaica just lead on this? That is the question, and what will it take to lead on this?
Well, it would
like
take,
Uruguay.
It would take, first of all, for the leaders to believe in what the people have been saying about this product. That's one. And secondly, to engage it. We have sugar, which is still the chief monocrop across this country. The expertise required to plant sugar are far less than what is required to plant ganja. Ganja is cultivated by the informal sector that is numerous if you really look at it. So what I'm saying is that the state is pushing one product and the people have their own understanding as to what their one product is.
Yes.
And it is really for the two to be able to face one another and understand the international context and be able to move forward. But it fundamental engagement with agro institutions is one of the key steps forward. We've seen in the history where banana cultivation was done by small farmers, especially in eastern Jamaica. So this is not something that tobacconist interests that we see all over Virginia, because this is also a part of the politics that increasingly more smokers are opting to smoke ganja than tobacco. So the traditional interests in tobacco are seriously being affected by what is becoming an awakening as to the virtue of cannabis. So I'm saying, who is going to be positioned to reap the most out of it? And that's a conversation I think small Jamaican farmers need to be in the forefront of. Rastafarian
and as you read a while ago, or it's in the report also, that the recommendation was made also for a sitting down, a one-on-one in a way with CARICOM, with the Caribbean, because if Jamaica can lead on this, but at the same time to do this as a block in terms of what CARICOM can achieve, that is also a suggestion. But we don't have that conversation going, do we? Well,
I am not aware of the conversation being in any way developed in the CARICOM sector, but it's not just ganja, it's herbs.
Yes.
Because all of these islands that are trying to be competitive with a sugar economy that is clearly struggling and failing, when by volume and by cost, engaging organically in
to
squeeze me in at the end.
Yes, to just encapsulate and to...
Well, the issue, I think, is a cultural one, that we're now at a political point, but we're really talking about culture. And the way forward, that we respect the ways that people have used to safeguard their sanity, which I think is a part of the conversation about ganja. That it's not just social sanity, it's financial sanity, it's medicinal, a range of easy options, the catharsis that the chalice ends, and I want to heal up my brethren them on the ends, them Naturalus and others, Newland, etc.
Yes.
But the fact is that these are spaces that from the very plantation days, in fact, Bilby have an interesting conversation where he says it's not the East Indians that actually brought it. They found it here among Central Africans, and it became immediately a point of unity. When we talk about Ganja as the healing of the nation, it's that psychological leap, the none but ourselves facility.
We have to wrap it there, Jelanie.